Good evening, and thank you for viewing the March 2nd meeting of the Arcata City Council. The City Council meeting is being held as a hybrid meeting with both in-person attendance and teleconference access via Zoom. If you would like to, please join us for the flag salute. Will the city manager please call the roll?
That was my fault. Sorry, Bridget. Mayor Atkins-Salazar.
Here.
Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Here.
Councilmember Matthews.
Here.
All present.
Great, thank you. So if you wish to make a comment during the meeting, either at the two open public comment periods or for an individual agenda item, there are 3 ways to do so. So if you're here in person, you'll line up over against the wall behind the podium when the item you would like to speak on is accepting public comment. If you're logged on to Zoom, click raise your hand when it's time for public comment on the item on which you wish to speak. And if you are on the phone, press *9 on the phone to raise your hand. When it is your turn, you will be prompted to dial *6 on your phone. So just to be really clear, we'll go to the public comment that's coming in via Zoom and phone first, and we'll take care of all of that. And so if you are online, make sure that right away when that item's coming up, like raise your hand so that you get seen and can be heard. And then after we've addressed everybody on the screen, we'll go to the in-person people, and then everybody who's lined up to speak for in-person can do that at that time. So I just want to be really clear, we're not going to go back and forth, so we just want to be, succinct in how we're doing it. All right, so next that takes us to ceremonial matters. So first, we have a proclamation recognizing March 8th, 2022 as International Women's Day, and this proclamation will be read by Council Member Matthews.
Thank you. A proclamation recognizing March 8th, 2022 as International Women's Day. Whereas International Women's Day began in the United States in 1909, has been celebrated internationally since 1911, and is an official holiday in 28 countries, and whereas on March 8th, people around the world will host festivals, parades, meetings, and ceremonies in honor of women and girls, recognizing their contributions and supporting their political and social rights. And whereas women and girls of every race, ethnicity, class, and gender identity are working for social and environmental justice, peace, and safety at every level, locally to globally, and whereas we benefit from the talent and spirit of social action that women and girls have made to our cities, nation, and world. We continue to thank and honor our women and girls, appreciate their achievements and contributions to our society, and support their voices as they change the world, bringing peace, justice, and harmony to our communities. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Arcata hereby recognizes March 8th, 2022 as International Women's Day, and encourages all community members to observe this day by participating in local events and working to create a more inclusive world where all genders are able to live to their fullest potentials, free from discrimination, oppression, and violence.
Thank you. I believe we have Carolyn Goldamer who will be on Zoom to accept this. I'm just wondering, both the screens are turned that way. Will we see her on this big screen here? Okay, it would just be good if we. Oh, if we're going to see her on our monitor, that's fine too. I just want to make sure that. We'll see who's talking. All right, thank you.
All right, go ahead, Carolyn.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, and I just a little white face on the screen. Maybe it looks different to you. Thank you. On behalf of our Humboldt branch of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, we appreciate your once again honoring the women of Humboldt County and the world in recognizing March 8th is International Women's Day. Our group has brought a celebration for International Women's Day to the community for the last 12 or 13 years now. And then for the last few years, we've joined with the Arcata Playhouse with the Zero to Fierce Women's Week. And so the theme of International Women's Day this year is Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable World. And on March 8th, unfortunately, because of COVID and our concern for our involvement with elders, it will be Zoomed. And there are, I don't know, can you see this?
No, I don't know if you can turn on your camera, Carolyn, but we can't see that.
Yeah, well, anyway, I'll just say it. I don't know where can you hear me still?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. Usually my camera's on during the Zoom, so I'll just continue. The theme this year for International Women's Day, as I said, is Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable World. So on March 8th, we're going to have a streamed event, and there are the Arcata Playhouse Zero to Fear site will give the information for Zooming in. I believe it's going to be on, I'm not sure they're setting up the media for it. Our guests are going to include Caroline Griffith from the director of the Environmental Center, and she's going to speak to Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable World. We're also going to have Jan Bramlett and Leslie Quinn leading a sing-along, and there will be words printed on the screen. So anyone at home that wants to sing along can, and there will also be an ASL interpreter. We're going to have special guests, Daisy Smith, who's a Europe tribal member. She's Jeannie McCovey's daughter, and she'll be giving an introduction native prayer. And then Naomi Steinberg is going to end the event for us. And of course, as usual, the Raging Grannies will add their bit of singing to open the event. So we'd really love to have as many people that can Zoom in to, I think it's on YouTube, but the Playhouse will give that information. It's a fun event, even when you're just doing it on the screen. I will mention that our group also, once again, has applications for scholarships that we give every year to residents of Humboldt County for projects that help develop peace and justice in our community or abroad. And we usually get quite a lovely selection of people that end up qualifying for our grants, and that can be found on our website or again in posters around town. Also, we have tickets for sale for a quilt that helps, the sale of which supports our scholarship fund. So we really hope that people will be able to attend, and we thank you once again for honoring all of the women with this proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn, and you're welcome. It's our pleasure. So next we have a proclamation in recognition of Girl Scout Week, which is March 6th through 12th, 2022, and this proclamation will be read by Councilmember Schaefer.
As a former Girl Scout of Arcata, I am proud to read this proclamation in recognition of Girl Scout Week, whereas March 12th, 2022 marks the 110th anniversary of Girl Scouts of the USA, founded by Juliet Gordon Lowe of Savannah, Georgia in 1912, and whereas throughout its long and distinguished history, Girl Scouting has inspired millions of girls and women with the highest ideals of courage, confidence, and character, helping girls gain leadership skills and learn lifelong lessons of contributing to their communities, and whereas Girl Scouting increases girls' awareness of opportunities available to them today in math, science, sports, technology, government, and other fields that can expand their horizons. And whereas this year, more than 2.5 million Girl Scouts nationwide, of which 28,000 of these Girl Scouts are of Northern California, celebrate 110 years of this American tradition, they look to the 50 million women who are former Girl Scouts as living proof of their impact of this amazing movement. 71% of female senators in U.S. Congress, 53% of female House of Representatives, as well as 3 former female secretaries of state, nearly all female astronauts, and numerous successful businesswomen, such as Sheryl Sandberg and Melinda Gates, have all been Girl Scouts. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Arcata hereby designates the week of March 6th through 12th, 2022 as Girl Scout Week and applauds Girl Scouting's commitment to developing the leadership skills of America's girls, dated March 2nd, 2022, and signed by Mayor Atkins Salazar.
Thank you, Councilmember Schaefer. Okay, so moving on to item number 4 is report by commission or committee. And this evening we have an annual report from the Historic Landmarks Committee, and that will be presented by the chair of that committee, Bill Rich.
Hi, I'm Bill. Hi, Ms. Mayor and council members. I do serve as the committee chair for the Historic Landmarks Committee. This year, we met exclusively remotely, and so it's good to be here today with everybody. The Historic Landmarks Committee is a group of volunteer members when we advise the City Council on matters pertaining to structures, sites, buildings, neighborhoods that have special character or significant historic architecture, culture, or aesthetic interest or value. Committee members also coordinate with community outreach, encourage public involvement, and provide public education relating to historic preservation and the benefits of historic landmark designation. I think our committee is composed of really outstanding individuals. I thought I would acknowledge them today. Tim Keefe is on our committee. He's a historian and archaeologist with Caltrans and brings a real wide perspective. Jill McDonald is a professional, historic preservation professional and a realtor. She knows buildings like the best of anybody. She's really great at the built environment. Alex Stillman really needs no introduction in this town. Alex brings a really broad skill set with a lot of background knowledge and kind of that institutional knowledge of our committee and the decisions that the City Council has made over many, many years. So we really appreciate her involvement. And I think our newest member is Ron Perry. He's a principal at Arcata, the adjunct school at Arcata High, Six Rivers. Yeah, he's a principal there. He's been involved in history throughout his educational time, a history teacher at Eureka High, and puts together a really outstanding calendar. Maybe you've seen it. I'm Bill. I'm an archaeologist, anthropologist, and try to bring some of that kind of experience to the table. Our staff liaisons, Dilo and Dave, are great and keep us on track and bring really great things for us to discuss. So that's our committee. It's those people. I think you couldn't really put together a much better group of individuals to help advise the council here on historic preservation matters. This year's been, like the rest of them, rather exciting. We've talked about a few very specific projects. Old Arcata Road Improvement Project, which has been a long-going project, involved outside consultants with regards to cultural resources. Our committee was asked to help kind of approve or agree with or provide input on the decisions that the consultants made. Our committee did agree with the consultants on some of the matters regarding historical resources for that project. We've been an ongoing project that we've been talking about is the nomination of the Plaza as a historical landmark. And so we've been continuing to work on that. That's been going on for several years. As you may know, there's a draft nomination that's around, and we're working with that draft to make sure it's as strong as we can make it and what we want to make it. So we've been talking about that again. There's also the historic context statement that Suzanne Guerra wrote many years ago. Well, maybe not many, but a few years back. That has not been totally finished. And our committee has been asked to look at that again and continue to critique and look for ways to get that to be completed so that the city can use that as a more formal document to explain the historical context of Arcata and its development. My favorite is May. It's Historic Preservation Month. This year we did a little bit different than other years. With Dilo's suggestion, we basically came up with QR code posters that linked places to history that was already written. We tried to make it easy for ourselves and develop these QR codes that would link to documents that were already existing. So several projects that had come forward for restoration, which already had historical narratives, we just linked to those and put them on those properties. And we got a lot of good feedback for that. And some of the people who took those QR codes on their places have asked that we redo that for them. They'd like to keep them there more permanently. So that was fun, and we hope to do that again this year. Some of the individual projects we spoke about were the house at I Street, which is now gone, if you've noticed. That building was an interesting discussion. It had been determined to be a historic landmark, a National Register eligible in '05, but through some neglect and really deferred maintenance, it slipped out of that, and the owners came forward and wanted to demolish, and we spoke about that for a while, and ultimately agreed that would be an okay thing to do. We made some conditions on that, that the new building that went in would kind of complement that historic character of the neighborhood. And I was personally interested in the idea of a privy pit in the backyard, so we kind of asked them to make sure to look for that as they started to dig around. Emily's house, just up the street from here, that building has come forward several times, and we again spoke about a new addition to that building. We try to encourage the reuse and continued use of historic buildings, and so we appreciate those kinds of projects where our committee can provide some input for you. We did have one special meeting this year that was regarding the Chapman House, which was a restoration project of high level, and I think that the owners there did a great job, and so they had some decisions were made about that house, and we had one special meeting regarding that. Broadly, we continue to discuss about what historic preservation incentives make sense to property owners here in the city. We want to encourage respect for the historic built environment and the historical materials. For example, old wood-framed windows, many people think those are no good and would rather see a vinyl window, and we have a lot to say about that. In fact, here in the City Hall, there's a display that's made to try to convey that kind of information. More recently, we've been discussing the new Gateway project. Staff has asked us to help articulate what it is about that neighborhood that's historical and what characteristics are historical in that neighborhood. We've formed a subcommittee to look specifically at which buildings would be worthy of landmark status and perhaps some designation of such, and ones that would be best to encourage owners to maintain. And so we know that's an important project for the city, and look forward to helping with David and Dilo on decisions in that area. So that's just a little bit about what we've been doing and who we are. And so I guess that's our yearly report.
Thank you, Bill. Are there any questions or comments for Bill?
I just want to say thank you for that presentation. It was really wonderful to listen to. I appreciate all of you and all you do. You've got a great team on that committee, so that's great. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't have a question either. I just want to say thanks for coming out. And as a high school history teacher, I appreciate the work that you guys do locally for preserving our local history. And I really look forward to working with you guys on the Gateway project and hearing what feedback Historical Landmarks has on that. And just thank you for all that you do to preserve the beautiful architecture and historic character that we have here in Arcata. So thank you guys.
Yeah, I also really appreciate the work that the committee does. And I just had a few questions. Would you please remind me what a windshield survey is?
Windshield survey. It's a coarse, broad stroke survey intended to be quick, one that can be done at a committee at a volunteer level. Basically, drive around, look through your windshield at buildings, and try to identify buildings of historical value through a lens based on the roadside. Not specifically looking at individuals that may be associated with the building or events that may be associated. It's strictly just an architectural analysis from a street view.
Great. You said provide guidance on development projects involving landmark properties. What were some of those projects?
Could you ask that word?
It says accomplishment number 1, provided guidance on development projects involving landmark properties.
We'll provide guidance on David, maybe you want to?
Yeah, I think you spoke to a few of them. The Chapman House was one. Emily's house was another. There was a demolition, which was a third. Those are the ones that are kind of jumping to mind, and I think the chair did speak to each of those in the presentation.
Yeah, 1192 I Street. The Emily's house, which is just up the road here, called the Shotgun House, real long and narrow. Also Chapman House, kind of near behind the co-op area. Those buildings all had decisions before the city with regards to changes to those buildings. And so at some point, the decision was made on your behalf to come to our committee for some guidance on those decisions. And we provided some input.
Great. Yeah, and I apologize if you did mention it. Sometimes I miss things. I need information repeated. And then provided input on historic preservation and the content of the Gateway Area Plan. Maybe that's supposed to be context. What kind of input did you provide on the Gateway Area Plan?
Yeah, we've been looking at maps and specifically at individual buildings to try to better identify if these buildings meet the eligibility values, the eligibility list that the city has put forward. So are these buildings old enough? Do they retain historical integrity? Is there anything else about these buildings that the committee might know to help inform the city on decisions that will affect those buildings in the future? We really would like to streamline the process for development. And people who have old buildings are often nervous about that. And the staff at the counter here really aren't historic preservation professionals. And so, we've tried and continue to try to provide any guidance on how to make that easier. Buildings that are old and really great are easy to sort out. Buildings that are new and don't even meet the age criteria are easy to sort out. But it's all that middle ground that is where lots of decisions have to be made, and those get much more difficult. And so what criteria will be used to make those decisions when someone wants to come forward to change windows or put a second story on or do various kinds of projects are some of the things that we're discussing. At this point, there's a handful of buildings, maybe more than a handful, that are clearly historical, have great integrity, and could be considered landmarks for the city. And so those have been identified, and we continue to work with the staff and to identify the next kind of the next tier down, kind of the lesser, which are a little bit more tricky. And so we do have a subcommittee. There's a kind of a windshield survey going on with our subcommittee. We intend to continue meeting and talking about individual buildings.
Very good, thank you. Let's see, it's a started dialogue of existing preservation incentives. What are the existing preservation incentives? or some, some examples, I guess.
Well, there's various incentives that I've seen put forward over the years I've been involved.
Is this the Mills Act?
Mills Act is a really important one that allows owners to use tax dollars to help their buildings be maintained with their historic character, and we'd like to see more owners taking advantage of that opportunity. We think it provides an incentive to respect the older buildings and not change them or come in for a demolition approach. Other incentives, we've seen some parking incentives setback, perhaps.
Yep. Yeah, there's some use incentives also that are included in the land use code. So they're mostly around ensuring that the historic resource can remain viable, whether it's through some adaptive reuse or through direct financial contributions through the Mills Act.
And I remember when we first did the Mills Act, there weren't a lot of people taking advantage of it. Has that changed?
No, it's not changed. Maybe we have one.
We have a couple applications that are making their way through. There are some pretty, without getting too technical and detailed, there are some pretty narrow windows that you have to fit through in order to have the Mills Act really pencil out for you. And a lot of it has to do with how long you've owned the property and how much your tax benefit will be as a result of that. So yeah, it's not super popular, but we do have a couple of important buildings that are going through that process right now.
Great. And then to ways to expand incentives to property owners, or could you share some of those ideas? That was my next question, is there anything, what can we do to encourage more people to take advantage of the Mills Act, if that's something we want?
Promote it, make it more visual. Those QR codes that we put out in May to highlight those buildings that are going through projects that those owners haven't seen big challenges in many cases, and that the process here with the permitting has been favorable. I think those are the kinds of things that people can hear more of, and we think that through the QR code and all the information that can be provided easily there for the public, I think is one way to encourage that kind of involvement.
Great. I think one of the things that the council has, over the last several years, really directed staff to work with the committee and to, create, more streamlined permitting with historic resources. When you have a historic resource, you're subject to a whole other set of, state and federal regulations. They're more expensive to keep up. Insurance requirements are higher. So there's a lot of disincentives sort of built naturally into the system that lead people to not want to become a historic resource or not want to be recognized as a historic resource. And so when we did the design review changes in 2016 or whenever it was, one of the outcomes of that was to start working on some more assurances or more certainty around the permitting process with historic resources. And that's where this concept of the windshield survey came up. And so we're still sort of in the middle end part of that process, I would say.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's it for my questions. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
No, those are good questions, and thank you, Council. Our committee looks forward to helping you with these kinds of decisions, and you should look to us for that help. That's what we are here for and what we want to do. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. We appreciate it. Do we have any members of the public do we have anybody online that is wanting to comment on this item? If there's anybody here that's wanting to, you can go ahead and line up, and we'll go to the online first.
Yep, we have one call-in user. I think they put their hand down and brought it back up. Go ahead, call-in user 1 on the Historic Landmarks Committee report.
Hello, can you hear me? This is Kent Sawatsky. I'm verifying you can hear me. Is that a yes or no?
Sorry.
Anyway, I'll go ahead and speak as if you can.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did wish to make comment on this. I appreciate being able to make comment on there. I just kind of had a little bit of a point of order. I'm big on participation. Apparently, we've had, 2 topics, and I believe the public's entitled to have a separate comment on each of those items that are agendized separately, but we can deal with that at another time. I did wish to basically give my shout out to Brett Watson, and I've been in these forums a long time, and I appreciate the report coming out. I do have some concerns regarding lack of consideration regarding the historic assets out in the Bayside project out there and how those have not been considered. I have there who said those were taken. Historically, in that particular area, that's on what I consider to be sacred ground. This is what was an Indian village, and instead of the project you had, historically, I would like to see that addressed, and maybe have it something that is a tribute to the Wiyot tribe instead of what you're putting out there. So I did historically, I think that's to be addressed. I did wish to make comment in general a little bit on all these topics. A person like Brett Watson who asks questions, that's a sign of intelligence. And I know we have a lot of new people out here kind of roll their eyes when he's asking these questions and act like he's dragging the meeting on. Well, that's not the case. The public wants to know these answers. So on one end of the spectrum, you have someone who's been there a long time and asks these pertinent questions regarding historical things and everything else. And that's what the public appreciates. So for any of you who wish to move beyond sitting in a city council, possibly move into the supervisor's chambers, that's kind of a requirement. So I just thought I'd give you a little pointer on that particular topic. And I guess I don't get to make a comment on the ceremonial presentations, and that's my question there. So is there, I guess I would make that, it was agendized, so I can't make it in the next thing when it's not agendized. So there's a little bit of a ambiguity how we're supposed to speak in participation. And you will find out as I participate in many of your meetings here and spend a lot of communication that's my main agenda. So anyway, thank you for my opportunity to comment on your historical thing. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate not being interrupted. Thank you.
Wait, you were interrupted because your time was up, but thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Okay, no further Zoom comments.
All right, so go ahead.
Hi, my name is Joanne McGarry, and I'm so happy to be here in person, although I just would like to ask the council members to speak up a little bit into the mic because I'm having a hard time hearing. Maybe it's where I'm sitting, but thank you for that. I just would like to sort of reiterate what the caller said about historical, looking at the historical landmarks and going back beyond the settler history, and always remembering we're on ancestral Wiyot land, and for all individual projects and broad-scale projects, the honoring that history, recognizing that history, and getting input from the current members of the Wiyot tribe about what we are planning to do, I think is vitally, vitally important. And so I just would like to add that to the historic landmarks purview of when they're looking at things, to go beyond just the settlement era and maybe have the Wiyots much more involved in a lot of this discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Is there anyone else in the room? All right. So thank you for the public comment on that. That takes us next into early oral communications. So this is the time period is provided for people to address the council on matters that are not on the agenda. At the conclusion of all oral communications, the council may respond to statements. Any request that requires council action will be set by the council for a future agenda or referred to staff. Speakers addressing the council are limited to 2 minutes. So if you're here in person, you can make your way towards the podium. If you are online, please raise your hand, and if you're press star 9 if you're calling in by phone and wish to make a comment. So we'll go ahead and go to the people on phone and on Zoom first.
All right, call-in user 1, go ahead.
Hello, this is Kent Sawatsky, and again, my point of order says since it was agendized for ceremonial matters, am I precluded from commenting on that? And I wish to have my time started when I get an answer to that question, please. That's a point of order.
We have historically not had public comment on ceremonial items. So your 2 minutes is starting now.
Thank you. So I will make comment on ceremonial items since I'm not precluded from doing that. I strongly supported the equality of genders. I've always been a person who supports that in a great amount of things. And I know there probably won't be a thing equally to have a men's and boys' day, but I think everybody should be treated the same. You're going to find that coming from me on an ongoing basis. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate the wonderful work that both the Girl Scouts do and the Boy Scouts do also as far as equality goes. And I know you do have Boy Scouts things saluted there, so they do get equal opportunity. Our world in which we live kind of makes it necessary for all of us, gender or whatever, to be blind to that. And I really hope that this board, when they're considering appointments and things like that, take that into effect. I always like to see a balanced council, whether it be race or gender or anything like that. So that's my comment on that particular item. Regarding the Jacoby Crick Gateway project, again, I started speaking on that a little bit ago. I have concern because it appears that Arcata is pulling a coastal permit. I was brought a copy of that today where I thought that was going to go through the county. That's on an agenda item for tomorrow. So maybe sometime your staff can address, or maybe you want to hear that they're applying for apparently a separate coastal permit. And you're going to have to deal with two different coastal permits, I guess, since you're in multiple jurisdictions. We will get input on the part that's within the county regarding the Jacoby Gateway project. And again, I will reiterate, we really would like to see that be a tribute to the Wiyot tribe and not just a roundabout. You can do what you want within your own jurisdiction. But for those of us who have landing and have things out in that area, we'd like to have control over what we have. And so thank you for my opportunity to speak on this particular topic.
You are welcome.
Our next speaker is Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
Hello, can you hear me fine?
We can.
Okay, great. Just a couple things. First, I want to really send kudos from last night's meeting for the council members that made statements and, added elements to your future goals coming up. And I thought that meeting went real well and was very productive. I want to bring up the recusal issue going on with Mayor Stacy and hoping that gets resolved. I mean, most folks I talk to are hopeful she'll be able to engage and fully participate. But the one issue that, has me thinking is that with the election coming in June, that other folks that want to possibly run or are going to run for office may have to deal with a similar process, with this recusal thing. So I'm just hoping we can get that resolved so that we don't end up with a new person coming on board that ends up in the same ballpark there. And anyway, I'm hopeful that does get resolved and Stacy can fully engage, and that's would help smooth things out for the rest of this year with all of what's going on. But anyway, that's my comment, and thanks for all your good work, all of you, and take care.
Thank you, Chris, and I will respond to that. I too hope that I can participate. That's why we went out of our way to go to the FPPC for that official ruling, and so we're waiting on them. But I'm very high hopes that we will get that back within a couple weeks. I'm hoping, and well before the election, so that will help inform people. Once I get that answer, we can definitely use that to help other people kind of gauge where they'll be able to participate or not. So we're all on the same page.
Okay, there's no additional early Zoom comments.
All right, so we will go with people here in person.
Hi again. Now I'm kind of calling myself McGreta at this point because I'm so inspired by Greta Thunberg. And locally, I am very interested in channeling her energy and thoughts in approaching the leaders of our community in declaring or redeclaring a climate emergency. I went back before I came to the meeting to the climate mobilization website page and saw how Arcata, along with Happy Camp and Bend, Oregon, and some other areas nearby had declared climate emergencies before the pandemic emergency. But the resolution I reread, and I encourage all our city staff and city council members to take a look at that resolution. And in light of the IPCC report on Monday that shows us in dire straits, and the email I sent to you late last night, I hope most of you saw that and are motivated to join me in wanting to do something quickly, urgently, to make it a Build Back Better Arcata in terms of the climate issue. I know some people are working on things to call attention to our Mother Earth by considering some sort of legal election or vote on putting the Earth flag at the top of the flagpoles in the City Council. I would like to propose that we not waste a lot of time and we just do it without needing to have it go to a vote of the citizenry. I think this Earth flag we have here behind the dais would be beneficial to have here behind my podium as the public comment is heard, so that we're constantly reminded that we are species on Mother Earth. And I just thank you for having us back in person. Thank you.
We are glad to be back in person as well. Thank you, Joanne. Okay, so that wraps up early oral communications, and so that'll take us to the consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the City Council and are enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of any of these items. If discussion is required, that item is removed from the consent calendar and considered separately. At the end of the reading of the consent calendar, council members or members of the public can request that an item be removed for separate discussion. So we have A, approve the minutes of the City Council meeting of February 9th, 2022. B, approve the minutes of the City Council meeting of February 16th, 2022. C, biweekly report on general warrants. D, declare a continuation of the local emergency related to the coronavirus pandemic. E, adopt resolution number 212-49, incorporating a list of projects for fiscal year 2022 and 2023 to be funded by SB1, the Road Repair and Accountability Act. F, adopt resolution number 212-50, establishing the city's opposition to state ballot measure 21-0042A1, the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act. And G, approve an agreement with the state of California acting by and through the Department of Transportation for cleanup and maintenance of state highways in the city limits for fiscal year 2021 and 2022 in the amount of $24,000, and authorize city manager to execute all applicable documents. Would any council member like to remove an item from the consent calendar?
Yeah, I'd like to remove items B, D, E, F, and G, please.
Just, is that B, D, E, F, and G?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any member of the public or staff that requests an item be removed from the consent calendar?
There are, let's see. Call-in user 3, did you have an item you wanted removed from the consent calendar other than B, D, E, F, or G? Call-in user 3?
Hi. Hi, this is Gerard Driscoll. It might be a little bit of a mistake here. I was trying to comment earlier. I raised my hand, but anyway, it didn't. This is non-agendized items. My hand was raised, but you weren't able to get to me for some reason. Anyway, I would just like to comment on last night's meeting a little bit on that Gateway project. I think that.
So, Uri, we're on the consent calendar right now. So, is there an item that you're wanting to speak on the consent calendar?
Well, I'm just wondering why I wasn't able to speak previously when my hand was raised. There's some glitch in your system or something. My hand had been raised on the early communication.
Yeah.
And I wasn't able to get through. I don't know why.
Okay.
I don't see any reason reading through the agenda. Anyway, I did everything I was supposed to do. I'm not sure why I wasn't able to be heard.
All right, well,
I just have
we're trying
about
to...
a minute. It's not that much.
You're right. We'll go ahead and give you your 3 minutes. We're all trying to figure out this hybrid approach. So this is 2 minutes, sorry. But yeah, so let's go ahead and reset the clock and go,
Sure,
why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I'll keep it as short as possible. Thank you very much. As far as the Gateway project, really there's a serious issue about the wastewater treatment. That needs to be fixed before any effort and energy is put towards developing even more needs for that. Once that's done, then there can be some more development, but I just think it's a waste of the city's time. And I also like to comment on what is out there at the gateway to Arcata from Samoa. What is there, the huge amount of garbage really needs to be addressed. That is not a good look for Arcata. And as a matter of fact, it seems to be at most of the entrances to Arcata. So I would really like to see some more attention put towards cleaning up these gateways to Arcata. Thank you very much.
You are welcome. Okay, so that takes us back to the consent calendar. So so far we've got items A and C still on there.
Colin, user 1, did you want?
Ken Sawatsky again. I just with your technology, it was really fuzzy. I just wanted to make sure that and get confirmation that D and F were pulled. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, all we've got left.
Thank you. That's all I needed to.
All right, all we've got left is A and C.
I'll make a motion to approve items A and C from the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
All right, we have an enthusiastic motion and second for A and C. All in favor?
Aye.
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 So that takes us to items pulled. Why don't you go ahead, Councilmember Watson?
Yeah, I just want to start with the minutes from the February 16th meeting. From what I recall, we just had a brief discussion at the start of the meeting about whether or not to increase the public speaking time to 4 minutes, and I just thought that should be reflected in the minutes because it was something we had a conversation about and kind of made a decision about. So yeah, just requesting that amendment to the minutes for item B.
Oh, and then I believe, Bridget, you want us to take these one at a time, correct? Okay. So then, that's all for B? Okay, so then is there a motion to approve item B on the consent calendar?
I move to approve item B with the stated changes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, takes us to item D.
All right. Let me see. Hold on. All right. So the first thing is recommendation number 2, find that the COVID-19 state of emergency continues to directly impact the ability of the council members to meet safely in person. So I don't think we can make that finding because we're here meeting safely. We're not wearing masks. So I just feel like we should just edit that to reflect the new norm, I guess. And then, yeah, I just had some general questions, just to try to get myself more up to date on everything that's been going on in the city. It says in the staff report, city's experienced the most significant employee deficit since the pandemic began. And let me see. We have a difficult time obtaining applicants. that there's been promotions or transfers of current employees, and I was hoping we could get more details on the promotions or transfers.
Yeah, I don't know if I can actually recall all of them right now. I think it's just we've been reflecting on, as many businesses have, we've, sort of they've dubbed it the sort of great, what do they call it? The great resignation. I know it started with an R. So we have seen several staff who have left either for other positions or for other lines of work, or have gone into private business where, quite frankly, salaries have been increased tremendously to be able to retain employees in the private sector faster than we've been able to, certainly in the public sector. And so we've just been filling a lot of vacancies, and I'd be happy to give a list of those to the council if that would be helpful, but I don't have them all in front of me tonight. But we're seeing rebuilding, but we also have a lot of very new staff that are in long training periods, and I think so the comment and being able to put it in the COVID is just to recognize part of that is filling positions that are frozen, part of that is just responding to resignations that have occurred, and that we are trying to get back up to speed, but it's definitely slower than any of us want to, and we're going to keep working on it.
Thank you. And then,
Can I just add something in about that number 2 point? Because at first I was really like, oh yeah, I totally agree with you. But then kind of thinking back to the last time that we were meeting in person, and we met once and then it wasn't safe anymore. So I think the state of emergency impacts our ability to maybe meet in person, or that it could change at a moment's notice depending on local statistics and state regulations and everything like that. So I think, is this like a piece of, including this is, kind of a statewide piece that we continue for the reason that we have hybrid meetings, right? And that we allow some staff members to Zoom in if they choose to, and, things like that, so that we should keep it on there for that reason is my understanding.
Yeah, I'm happy to look if we can augment that language. At this point, this is our first meeting that's open to the public. At the time that this staff report was written, we had been talking about hopefully going back to some in-person meetings, but not sure. But there are certain findings that the council does need to make, which are also located in this staff report around the public comment opportunities. Starting on page of your packet 27, under the council, commission, and committee. So the city council allowing the hybrid meetings. The legislation that's been passed to support hybrid meetings does require you to make those findings. So I'll review that legislation again in light of that legislation, see if there's changes that we can make to that language to allow that hybrid meeting option.
Yeah, I think it's important to leave it in just, to make sure that we have the chance so that everybody can participate, whether they want to be here or not, or they don't feel safe being here, or for whatever reason that might be for their personal life, and for our staff as well. As we see, the entire city staff isn't here tonight, so I think leaving that in is the best, course of action.
I see where you're going with that. The way it's written, we literally cannot make that finding, as we all sit here without masks on and have determined that it's safe, and we've allowed the public to come. So it's hard. I don't understand how we can make that finding when we're doing the exact opposite right now.
So if we change that language or take this out, then are we not allowed to have hybrid meetings anymore? I'm just wondering about the legality of that, because taking that out, if that affects that, does not seem like the right decision.
It's certainly the will of the council tonight. I wouldn't be able to answer that question directly tonight, but I'd be happy to research it if you're comfortable, supporting this tonight, and then we'll look at it for future meetings or not. That's the decision of the council.
Yeah, I do think the one thing that we've learned throughout the last 2 years is a sense of ambiguity and being able to have to pivot pretty much immediately should other circumstances arise. So I absolutely agree with Sarah. Yes, we're sitting here unmasked right now, but there could be a new variant tomorrow. So
yeah, it's just not what the language says. I feel like you guys are saying we're going to approve something that's not true. The language is very specific. It's our obligation our legal obligation to approve things that are correct and accurate. If we can amend the language, I'm open to that. But we legally cannot make that finding. It's pretty cut and dry. It's pretty straightforward.
All right, so I'm going to try to piece this together. I believe that it's important for tonight's meeting that we that those who are comfortable do vote on this and declare this, because we could get into some issues if we don't. However, I'm totally hearing Councilmember Watson's concern, and I think we would all, I'm wondering if we're all open to research being done on that, and then we could further discuss that once the research has been done?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to let that happen for it to come back, but right now, as it's written, I can't make that finding.
Okay,
I do think that the COVID-19 directly impacts the ability of maybe the city council in general, maybe not directly us members, but the process of city council to meet safely in person. That's why there's 2 people in these council chambers, because probably a lot of people don't think it's safe to meet in person. So,
Plus, we are having the measures that we are distancing. I'm sitting next to an open window. I mean, there are measures.
I mean, I get it. You guys, you really want to pass it. We're trying really hard to justify it. I'm just telling you how I feel. I mean, I think to say city council includes this body of people and processes, I feel like is too broad of an interpretation that I'm more than I'm comfortable with.
Okay, so what I'm thinking is, since it, just by the level of discussion, it seems like 3 of us are fine to continue on with how it is and vote for it. And obviously, Councilmember Watson, if you're not comfortable with it, you should not support it. So having said that, we can have a motion and a second, and we can vote and move forward.
And we do have 2 members making public comment.
Oh, okay. Well, let's go to that. Thank you.
Go ahead, call in user 1. Kent, go ahead if you had comments to make on the local emergency related to COVID-19.
I do, Karen. When you call Karen, caller number 1, unless you have something else to go by, I don't know that's me, so I did not unmute. I was not requested to unmute. I do appreciate the comments that Supervisor Watson made here, insofar as, and I know some of you are new up here, but if you don't have enough information to make a finding or to make a decision there, you basically, in the normal process that I've seen in all the entities I attend, you basically abstain from voting, and that's a very common occurrence. And to move forward with something and to make a fraudulent finding on something, I find to be unheard of out in the forums that I deal with, which is the supervisors for Tuna, Trinidad, Blue Lake, Arcata, just about all the entities out here, and even state entities I deal with. I hope you will learn from Supervisor Watson there as far as the policies and procedures and the ways to do things correctly without making yourself make incorrect findings. Regarding this particular topic, and that was in general, I wish to say that, there's many people. I'm fully vaxxed. I support everybody vaccinating. I've been wearing my mask today, even though not. But as far as this emergency goes, I think we're close to the emergency being over. And I know I'm not a doctor, but I have seen the trends. I have done research, and I deal with doctors and things. This new virus has done us a big favor. It looks like it's pretty well the end of this. And I know it has benefits to you for financial benefits, that you can still vote for money, and I can understand that. But other than that, I highly recommend that you possibly table this, or else you just drop that particular finding out of what you have there, and then maybe you can or have a different finding that's correct. But findings are very important, and this is what the whole legal system is based on, upon your ability to make a finding, and that has to hold up in court. Thank you for my opportunity to speak.
You're welcome. Maybe you missed it, but we absolutely encouraged Councilmember Watson to make the voting choice that he thought was best for him. All right.
Yeah, I still have a couple more questions too that might change my opinion.
We've got 2 more, well, at least 1 more, 2 more public comment if you want.
Okay, I've been unmuted.
Yep, go ahead, you're
turn to speak?
Yep, on coronavirus, a local emergency.
Right, yeah. Well, I would have to agree with Mr. Watson for sure. If you can't have language that is clear and concise, it just needs to come back. is there really any harm in it coming back with appropriate language that can make it work? Now, frankly, I think that we may see more and more, even after the emergency related to COVID, of these hybrid meetings. It does make it fairly convenient and allows people to zoom in and watch and participate that may not have otherwise been able to do so, including staff as well. So I think that this is really worth a good look at and get the language right, so that we can, function as a democracy. And so I've got to fully agree with Brett. Things need to be clear and legally defendable. Thanks very much.
Okay, no further Zoom comment is closed on this item.
Do we have any public comment from inside the room?
And I don't know exactly what this finding language is right now, but I just saw the report today that a person in their 60s died here in Humboldt County from COVID, and there were 25 cases. I get tested weekly. I wear my mask. I consider myself an essential citizen and really appreciate participating in person when I can, and when it's safe. I feel safe right now. I don't know what this language you're talking about in declaring a climate, not a climate emergency, but a COVID pandemic emergency. I would really like us to not consider anything over just yet, because somebody my age died of COVID still in Humboldt County. So whatever that relates to what you guys are talking about, I like this hybrid. People can come and show up. People can stay at home and Zoom in or call in on the phone. This is democracy at its best, with the options available for whatever reasons people are choosing to participate how they choose. So maybe look at it afterwards, but I would hopefully like you to move on.
Thank you. I'm very comfortable with the language of this, and I'm going to make a motion to declare a continuation of the local emergency related to the coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah, I would just caution you guys, in my experience, and I think it's probably the most practical thing to do is just to have it come back and we vote on it again. But yeah, we can move forward.
If this came back to us at our next meeting after researching the language more, would that cause a lapse in this and cause us any problems legally for meeting virtually and things like that?
I'd have to count the days. The governor's order put in a 30-day. Our municipal code has a 40-day. So, I mean, I guess I would prefer, if the option is to return, that maybe we try to change the language slightly, to say something like directly impact the ability of council and the public. If the idea is that there are certainly many more members of the public. We've got 11 attendees by Zoom that feels safer attending or more convenient, one or the other.
What do you think?
This is something
do you
that
feel like we can make the finding?
This is something that comes back at every meeting, right? So
it comes back at least every 30 days per the state code.
So,
and this was just written prior to certainly tonight's meeting, and not knowing for sure if we would meet safely.
I just feel like things are still essentially in flux. We still have cases, and
if it's still under, a governor order, I feel comfortable, making these findings if, that's what's happening across the state. And, I'm a teacher. I'm still wearing a mask in school every day. I see it. I have kids out sick. I coworkers that are sick all the time. I mean, I see it. So I would like to second Councilmember Matthews' motion, and then just make a request of staff that we do take a look at this language to make it more broad, maybe work with the city attorney as well to make sure that we're, lined up with all the legal findings as well.
What do you think, Karen?
I think the way that it's written directly impacts the ability of the council members to meet safely in person. I think there is a personal sense in that. You are all comfortable here meeting in person. We've got several staff that are still coming in by Zoom. There are people that feel and don't feel safe coming to meetings like this. And so I don't have an issue with the core of the finding. Hopefully we don't all end up with COVID tomorrow. It's the transmission rates in this county are still very high. So yes, we're meeting. Is this safe? I'm going to say 50-50, quite honestly. Staff last night and tonight, because we're closer, have decided to mask again. So that's part of this as well, promoting social distancing measures. So in that regards, certainly.
Safety is a broad word and a really personal definition to a lot of people. So I think it's also hard to legally define safety, but.
Yeah, so it feels to me like by approving this and making that finding, we're acknowledging that we're having a meeting right now that's not safe. I think that's a bad message to the public. So I feel like if we do make this finding, that we should go back to Zoom meetings.
Or at least wearing masks, but again, we're following state and CDC regulation, so. And again, the state tells us to do this as well, so we can meet in the meetings. Again, I second Councilmember Matthews' motion.
Okay, well, we have a motion and a second on item D on the consent calendar, so all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed?
No.
Okay, thank you, so the motion passes with Councilmember Watson dissenting on that one. Okay, that takes us to E.
All right, item E. So yeah, could the staff please explain to me what SB1 is?
SB1 stands for Senate Bill 1 that was passed in the year 2017-18 to increase some tax on gas, so that will generate additional revenue for the state for the road projects, road improvement projects.
Where does the funding for SB1 come from?
Gas tax.
Okay, this is just gas.
Yeah, gas and diesel, and there are other elements like registration of electrical vehicles. So there are a list of items. So main is gas and diesel tax and registration of vehicles.
Okay. I was just able to look at the bill a little bit and just some of the stuff I caught. It talked about being audited or investigated for use of funds. And is that something that's ever happened to the city or been audited?
No. Not to my knowledge.
Do we do CEQA on SB1 projects?
Most of the projects are like a rehab project, so they're overall exempt, so we don't do a specific CEQA project.
Okay.
Or CEQA on the project. Okay.
Did you have something to say?
Yeah, I did just have a question about, and sorry, it was the same vein, but I was just going to wait for you to finish. But I did have a question on this too. How are the projects chosen that are, in what order are they chosen to receive these funds and then get fixed up?
So we have a payment management plan in place. There's one copy at the council office too, and we use that as a guiding document. And a payment management plan is prepared for 5 years. And that is one of the guiding documents we use, and other is, as a staff, we see what the roads needs more improvement. So that's how, based on that payment management plan and the staff's review of the streets, we pick the projects from that list.
All right. I'm sorry, what was the answer to the question, do we do CEQA on SB1 projects?
Most of the projects we do through SB1, so far we have done, they are exempt from CEQA. They are like a road rehab projects. Maybe you can expand on that, but I think that's
okay.
The statement, yeah.
And then, so it's like an application?
No, it's not an application.
Okay.
So money just comes from a state controller's office directly to us, and money comes based on the population of the city.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah.
So we always get a certain amount, and then we decide how to spend it. Okay. And then it talks about, let me see, in the resolution about there being a shortfall. Let me find that.
While you're looking for Brett, Councilmember Watson, can I just ask, because I think that's what you're going towards, isn't there, what happens if we don't use all the money, right? Isn't that what you're kind of?
No, but that's a good question. That's a good question.
Right, so isn't there like, we have to use X amount of money or else there's something that happens, right?
Well, I'm not sure what exactly you're asking, but yes, whatever money we get, it's not enough, so we will end up using it either way. So there's no leftover money. There will never be a leftover money for streets. We are always short on street projects. So do you see the street conditions?
Yeah, so it just talks about in the first whereas that there's a funding shortfall statewide.
Yeah, I think how the Senate bill came along was most of the funding for the streets comes from major source is through gas tax. And gas tax has not been raised, I would say, since late 90s. And hence that they are talking about shortfall because inflation has gone up, everything has gone up, but the gas tax has not gone up. So that's why they wanted to do that in the year 2016-17.
Okay.
Well, just to add in on that, there's also been a shortage because of electric vehicles that aren't, and so that's a whole consideration. There's a whole task force on trying to figure out how to reconcile those differences. As we move towards all electric, we won't be having that revenue source.
My next question is, SB1 includes accountability and transparency provisions. Could you describe some of those?
Well, transparency is this is transparency. We are bringing it here to the council, so it becomes a public process. The public knows what projects we are funding, what project we are working on. So that's the goal. And hence, we have to do this every year.
Thanks.
Show you the project, what we are doing, and then once it's completed, we have to submit a report to the state that's what we spend our money on.
And then down lower, it says, the funding will enable the city to continue essential road maintenance, rehabilitation projects, safety improvements, repairing and replacing aging bridges. Are we repairing and replacing any aging bridges with this year's money?
Not this year's,
okay,
definitely, but this is like an overall for all the projects that we have done in the last 5 years and the future projects. So.
And it says increasing access and mobility options for the traveling public. Do these projects mean any of that?
Yeah, but I would say in sense, yes, all the road improvement project, and it increases the accessibility.
Okay. And could you, I guess for the benefit of the public, and maybe you said this already and I missed it, just describe the pavement management system?
Pavement management system, the book that we have?
It just says the city used a pavement management system to develop the SB1 project.
Yeah, so that's what I earlier mentioned, that we have a pavement management plan in place that's prepared every 5 years. HCOG pays for that, and not only for the city of Arcata, it pays for county and other cities. So and it's done for 5 years, and we use that as a guiding document. And currently we are working on it, and hopefully before the budget is approved, we will have an updated pavement management plan for the next 5 years.
Thank you. And then the last whereas, it talks about investing in complete streets infrastructure and using cutting-edge technology. I was just wondering what the cutting-edge technology is that we use.
Well, the cutting edge would be, I would say, our example of cutting edge would be trying to work together with the local cities and the county to create a larger project to get a better price. I think that's what I would say. It's one of the cutting technology, I would say.
Okay. No, and that's a good point too. Like, could you just remind me how that works? Like, so some paving projects we do on our own, but then larger projects we pool with the county?
Not larger projects. There's only like 1 or 2 projects. I would say 1 project a year we try to do with the county and other cities like Trinidad, and Blue Lake, and Fortuna combined.
Okay. All right, that's it for my questions. Thank you very much, Nature.
Do we have any other questions from council? Okay, then let's go ahead and go to public comment.
All right, our first public comment, if call-in user 1 is still Kent, go ahead.
Karen, thank you for the prompt. This time I was able to tell that you were asking me to speak. That helps. Yeah, I just had, your process of micro-paving, which is shared as anybody who knows, who keeps in track of what happens throughout the county, is possibly a cutting-edge technology, but it's been around for a long time, so I don't think the question was answered by Netra there. He spoke about the cutting thing of batching things together for price. I did have a question, and I'd like a yes or no answer if you could ask Netra on your staff there. It was earlier mentioned that there was no reason for CEQA on your projects because they were basically, I guess, repairs or an existing thing of that nature. So my question, yes or no, and of course a follow-up question would be, why wouldn't CEQA be required? Are any SB1 funds being used for the roundabout in the Jacoby Crick area? And if they are, then I would like to know why a full CEQA evaluation of that project wasn't done. So those are, I guess, 2 questions there. That's a compound question. So I'd appreciate you asking your staff that question. And again, I always appreciate I'm sorry, I apologize. Not Supervisor Watson, but Councilman Watson. I'm used to, that category. But anyway, I appreciate the question. It also shows, when you think that you ask questions, when he pulls something off consent, maybe you guys should start pulling them off also, rather than making him look like he's the only one paying attention. Just a suggestion. Thank you for my opportunity to speak.
And I will have staff get back to you with that answer offline. Thank you.
And call-in user 3, Uri, it was before.
Yeah, hi there. Thank you. The Councilwoman Schaefer brought up a good point. Where or how is this? How are these projects determined? The road repair. Boy, I'd really like to have access to that list and the process of determining. If you need any recommendations, I could point out a few places. The bottom of Pickle Hill is one of them for sure. Yeah, these are all good questions. And one of the questions I had, because this is funded by gas tax, and there was a point brought up about electric vehicles, and I realize that is kind of a problem. And as vehicles get more efficient, there is less gas burn, blah blah blah. But are these funds also used for bicycle paths that obviously bicycles don't pay any into this gas tax? So, there's two questions. Where would I find this road repair list, and how can the public put input into determining priorities, and are these funds being used for bicycle pathways? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Uri. I see Netra jotting down notes, so he's going to get back to you offline. So you've got two assignments, Netra. You got all that written down? Okay, thank you. Who do we have next?
No more public input.
And I have one more question. Sorry, I almost forgot this one. All right, are you ready for a hardball, Netra? Are you ready for a hardball question?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. All right. Do you give me consent? So when we were talking about the old Arcata Road roundabout project, I asked why we didn't put a speed feedback sign in, and you said because they don't work. So I'm just wondering why we're going to spend $15,000 on this one and put it in at Spirit Alliance.
Well, I would say in that context, it's not working. Currently, we have a speed feedback sign there at Old Arcata Road, and we have heard from people that people are not obeying that. However, we have a case, especially on 11th Street, I would say at intersection of 11th and Q, where we put speed feedback sign, and at the Janes Road near hospital, speed feedback sign. We have heard from public that they have been functioning. When they are walking, they have witnessed people slowing down when they see that.
Thank you. And they work for me. When I see them, I slow down. So.
I live at the intersection of Alliance and Spear, so I appreciate that very much. Thank you. I have children. No.
That's it for my questions. Thank you.
I will make a motion to approve item E from the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, motion passes unanimously. It takes us to item F.
I just didn't really understand this, and I was hoping the staff or council or somebody could please explain it to me better.
Can I just add one funny thing? Because Karen explained it to me really well, and I thought it's funny because we're opposing the ability to be able to tax people. So it's not opposed to it. I think it is a funny kind of nuanced language that is slightly confusing because we're opposing the fact that we want to do something. But please, give me us all of that same explanation. But I just thought it is an interesting kind of nuanced language that I'm glad you pulled this because it is maybe hard for the public to grapple that one too, because it is kind of like an oxymoron almost. But.
And I did ask for staff time several days before the meeting, several times, and I was not given that. So I apologize for having to ask these questions now.
Yeah, so I'll just share. So this opposition to what has just qualified as a potential state ballot measure for the November 2020 election is a piece of legislation right now that is known as 21-0042A1. It's called the Taxpayer Protection Government Accountability Act. So the League of California Cities has asked all cities to get out ahead of even campaigning starting around this ballot measure. They'll be gathering signatures. Well, no, I guess they have. I guess it is on the ballot at this point. So, I mean, the legislature will also take it up, but I think the league is asking cities to get ahead to say there are provisions in this similar to a bill that they saw working through the legislature and a potential ballot measure in 2018 that would severely restrict local government's ability to charge fees and to take ballot measures. So, for example, our Measure A that we just took in 2020, we took it in a way that would no longer be allowed under this bill. It would have had to have a sunset period on it. It passed by a 2/3 vote, so it would still have passed under this measure. The other really large provision is right now in the state of California, if you have a voter initiative ballot measure, so a petition, a group gets together and decides, an example here locally is the countywide measure on rent control or rent stabilization. A voter or a citizen-led initiative right now only has to pass by 50%. This would require those to pass by 75%. In addition, there is a lot of real kind of subtle guidance that we're starting to work through in this around how local governments can charge for rent and fees for properties. This is probably not going to affect us as much as it might affect large cities that have agricultural lands, but we do have several properties that we do lease. And so right now the analysis is that that'll start to place limits and restrictions on what city governments, state governments, county governments could charge for rent versus just being able to charge market rent on some of those. Even things such as our recreation facilities, our sports fields that may not have other. I mean, we're not going to ever charge what, like a Major League Baseball, we charge in essence what the market will bear in our region as well for a lot of those, but it could impose further restrictions on those. So that's kind of the nutshell.
Yeah, I guess I'm still not, I'm just still not grasping it. Could you maybe repeat it again, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to read specifically from the league summary. In their words, it limits voters' input. It prohibits local voters from providing direction. Many cities use what are called advisory ballot measures to say, you've passed this much in tax. So you've passed a general fund ballot measure that only has to pass by 50%. And now we're going to put an advisory measure on as to how you might want that money spent. So it would prohibit the public from being able to do. We haven't used an advisory measure here in Arcata, but that's just another limit if we had wanted to do that. It changes what they refer to as the upland decision. So this is the legal decision that says that citizen-led initiatives only need to pass by 50%. So it would invalidate that decision, therefore making a voter initiative ballot measure pass by 2/3. Restricts local fee authority to provide local services. So it sets new standards, which are still a little bit undefined in here, for fees and charges paid for the use of local and state government property. So it could restrict, in the big sense around the state, how much oil companies pay, utilities companies pay for access to right-of-ways, gas companies, railroads, garbage, franchise fees. That could affect our franchise fees here in Arcata, what cable companies pay to be on public right-of-ways, and basically what large utilities and other corporations pay for the use of local public property. For the rental or the sale of local government properties must be reasonable, which must be proved by clear and convincing evidence. So if that's just an appraisal, we don't know yet. A lot of that's just undefined. So without further definition, the league is saying we don't support this.
It says, number 3 says, requires votal approval to expand existing taxes.
Yeah, I can give you a simple example of that. Our local utility users tax that we talked about last night, if we wanted to expand that to, well, we did at one point expand that to cell phone technology. A new technology came out. It would require that to go back for a vote. And we're not doing a lot of annexations, so I don't want to send out any wrong messages, but if we annexed in a small piece of property, we would have to take it back out for a vote to levy it on those annexation properties. So any changes around those, right now, the way this is written would also require additional voter initiative, a voter approval again, if that helps.
Thank you, it does. And then, who wrote this resolution? Was this something we just got from the league?
This was from the league, yes.
That's all my questions. Thank you very much for taking the time to explain it to me twice.
I'll make a motion to approve, or wait, no, public comment, right?
Yep, we have one. Go ahead. Kent, go ahead.
Again, thank you for the prompt. On those prior comments, I was a little bit concerned that the answers that we ask for our questions won't be brought forward to the public, so I'm hoping next meeting you will agendize those answers so the public can hear them rather than just those of us who ask that. If your staff is not competent enough to answer a simple yes or no question that I asked there, that concerns me also. Regarding this particular topic, I think you might want to be careful what you ask for. I see pretty much everything Karen said there kind of makes sense and is in everybody's personal best interest. And here's the question you might ask Karen. If it only takes 50% of the people to put an initiative, and you had 75% of the people to go ahead and approve an initiative, or 90%, then I guess 50% people could vote, 50% plus one vote could repeal that initiative. So if that's what I understand is happening there, that's kind of an interesting one. The way it's phrased here, and a lot of the things sounded pretty good to me, really. Taxpayer protection and government accountability. Maybe they've mislabeled this or they've tried to brand it as something it's not. But to me, it sounds like it's actually that. I like accountability. I like things that don't have total go on forever without having the voters have a chance to have an input every, let's say, 12 years or 16 years. Working with the cities of Trinidad and Fortuna, we went ahead and encouraged and brokered sunsets on things, and they were done willingly. So there's nothing wrong with sunsets on taxes. It just enables us to all say, is it being spent correctly? Same as we're talking about a gas tax. Is not being spent correctly, possibly because the electric cars aren't being taxed. I don't see what's wrong with readdressing things on a regular basis. And I don't know why the public should have a problem with that. So thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Do we have anyone else waiting to speak?
Go ahead, Uri, if you're still calling user 3.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Well, obviously, I'm a big fan of accountability as well. And I would hope that our elected officials are too. But I'm a little bit confused about what this item is about. Is this voting to oppose taxpayer protection and accountability? And if that's the case, then I got to really strongly advise you against it. Against agreeing to voting in favor of opposing taxpayer protection. It's a little ambiguous of what's really going on. Anyway, maybe I'm just not bright enough to figure this out, but I think certainly the annexing anything into the city, anything additional, should definitely go to the people affected. And, if you're imposing a tax, I must agree with the previous caller that a sunset is really a good thing. That's a way to bring it back to the public, show that you're being responsible with your constituents, your voters' money. I think that's really imperative. And if it looks good, it builds confidence in what the decisions you guys are making. So I think accountability, transparency, and sunset clauses in these taxes is really a good thing. I think it can work in everyone's benefit and improve our way of life here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments?
Go ahead, Sherry or Ed.
Hi. I agree with the city of Arcata joining the League of Cities and opposing this ballot measure because it sounds like it's taking away local government ability to raise funds, and it's also taking away voters' ability to pass initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have anyone else?
No more public comment.
Okay, so before we go to the vote, I will just say that, as I'm sure many of you know, sometimes the way things are labeled isn't reflective of the true spirit of what's in there, and I think that's the problem with this. Yes, a Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act, that sounds good to pretty much all of us, but when you get to the meat of it, it's problematic, and so that's why the League is asking cities to oppose it. Doesn't mean all cities will, but that's the recommendation. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve item F.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And I just want to say before I don't want to get bogged down in the back and forth. So it has been the practice, at least in the short term that I've been here, that we haven't, we take public comment and we don't do a back and forth dialogue with answering on the spot and going with that. I was trying to be a little generous in nature, and that's coming back to bite me, so we're going to go back to that. So I absolutely appreciate your comments, but we won't be responding. So nature, I would not respond to those because we don't want to, we wouldn't want to violate anything. So go back to our normal procedures. So thank you for your comments. All right, takes us to item G.
Yeah, how was the amount of $24,000 determined?
I think that's what they had, Caltrans. So Caltrans contacted us. They had some money left that we could spend before June 30 of this year for the beautification purposes. So that's how we did some research and talked to some contractors and got some price, but that's what the money they had. We may not be able to spend all of it, but we'll be spending less than that, a bit less.
Okay. And who wrote this maintenance agreement?
What's that?
Who wrote the maintenance agreement?
Maintenance agreement was initially draft came from the state,
Okay.
Caltrans. And
Did the city attorney review it?
yes.
Okay. How come it's just like some of these charges, $125 for a bag of trash? Why is that?
Well, that's the rate we got from contractor, and that we're using the price.
Okay. It just seems really
It's
high.
not a one trash bag. I think trash bag full of garbage.
Yeah.
Taking it there somewhere. And it,
Okay. And then there was also a category of other under expenses.
Could be miscellaneous. I do not have an attachment that came from the contractor, but that other included. I think that there were some miscellaneous items that they listed, and I didn't put it here.
Okay.
I could get back to you on that one.
Okay. Yeah, that's all I got. Thanks.
Questions from council? All right, let's go to the public.
I see no public comment on this item.
Let's pause for a minute just to be sure.
Okay, last call for Zoom public comment on item G, agreement with Caltrans.
All right, anyone in the room wanting to comment on item G? All right, so let's go ahead and see if we've got a motion.
I will make a motion to approve item G from the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. All right, that takes us to the end of the consent calendar, and I'm going to recommend we take a 5-minute break. So we'll be back at 7:40 for part 2. So thank you. Okay, welcome back from that brief recess. So now we're moving on to new business. Next is item A, to receive an update on the local coastal program. So could we please have a staff report from our Community Director, David Loya?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and council members. Pleased to be before you tonight to bring forward the local coastal program and to have a brief discussion around what it is, the history of it. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the local coastal zone and regulatory framework that we've developed. Also, I have some information on sea level rise that I'll provide as sort of an optional part of the presentation. I understand a lot of this, the direction was developed before the majority of the council was present, and so I have that information as well. It's not a thorough or very robust discussion. I can certainly bring that back if you're interested, but it kind of gives a high-level overview as to how we landed on sea level rise policy. And then I just have a couple of brief comments on the document itself. So I will jump in. Got the presentation here. This is our beautiful town looking out towards the bay. Okay, so just starting with a super high-level overview, what is the local coastal program, or I may slip and call it an LCP? So the local coastal program consists of two primary components. There's the coastal land use element, which is equivalent to a general plan element. And then there's the coastal zoning ordinance, the more detailed standards and measures that are required to implement that policy. This is going to be a theme as we go through the updates to the general plan, the gateway area plan, and a lot of the work that we'll be doing this year. You'll see this over and over again, where you have a policy document and then you have the document that implements it. I'll pause just for a moment here to reflect on, some people have looked at the gateway plan and they said, hey, there's not a lot of detail in there. Where's all the detail? Similarly, you're going to look through this local coastal element and you're not going to see a lot of the detail of how this thing would be implemented, what the impacts would be of implementing it, what the the detail around what development will look like, because that'll be reserved for the coastal zoning ordinance. So we have the policies and standards, and those two things, the local coastal element and the coastal zoning ordinance, constitute the local coastal program. We also have a whole bunch of ancillary and related documents that have been developed over the years that relate to background existing conditions or projections for sea level rise. Those are not regulatory documents, but they help us to understand the policy that we're adopting and the standards that we're putting into place and how they relate to the Coastal Act, which ultimately we need to be consistent with. So why update the LCP? Why are we doing this? Well, in short, it's because our current LCP is printed on a dot matrix printer. The element was adopted in 1989, and it covers the policy areas necessary to address the Coastal Act, but not in anywhere near the detail that we have in the local coastal element that's before you tonight. And then the zoning was adopted in 1994. There have been amendments since then, but we basically have a completely separate zoning ordinance that overlaps and conflicts with, in some ways, the land use code, which was adopted more recently. And we'll talk a little bit about that history, why we have these two documents. But in effect, the reason we want to do this update is because our current local coastal program is very out of date. So why haven't we already done so? If this document is, dates back to, when I graduated from high school, why haven't we amended it yet? Well, I'll say that we have tried. So in 2000, we adopted the city's General Plan 2020. General Plan 2020, if you look through your copy of it, you'll see several of the policies have a little wave symbol, and there's a discussion at the beginning of the document about how these wave symbols are intended to reflect the policies that are intended to apply in the coastal zone. And we developed that document and adopted it in 2000 with the intent of turning around and getting it certified as the local coastal element. When we completed that document and turned to the state and said, okay, we were ready to, to get this piece adopted, Coastal Act says we can adopt these separately. So we're going to have our land use plan or our local coastal element adopted first. They said, well, why don't you wait until you get the zoning together? You know, we know you're getting ready to do a zoning ordinance on this, so why don't you wait? So we said, okay, we'll wait. In 2008, we adopted the Land Use Code. The Land Use Code was a zoning ordinance that was intended to be the companion ordinance to the local coastal element that's contained in the general plan. And those two documents were intended to be both the implementation and the policy documents necessary to implement the Coastal Act and the coastal zone. We worked with our local office on that document from around 2008, it was 2009-ish is when we really started working in earnest with them, until 2012, when we submitted an application for them to certify those documents. So in 2000 we were ready. They said, no, wait until you get your land use code together. So we waited until we got our land use code together. After years of working with the Coastal Commission staff, we had a document that we were ready to submit, 2 documents at once in 2012. In 2012, I think it was closer to 2013, the Coastal Commission did a tentative certification, a conditional certification, if you will, of our local coastal zoning, our local coastal program, rather. They said, we will certify this document if you make changes X, Y, and Z. At the time, those changes X, Y, and Z constituted several hundred pages of changes to the documents that we had submitted. Several hundred pages of changes to the documents that we had already worked for several years with the coastal staff to develop. And we hadn't had time to review it. And by the time we got back and asked the council, you know, do you want to move forward with these changes to try and get a certified coastal document? And after we had time to review and digest them, staff's recommendation at that time was that we do not make those changes and that we pivot and try and work on, you know, another tactic. The council supported that recommendation and ultimately said, yes, let's not make these changes and let's work to improve the process with the Coastal Commission. Around 2013, 2014, we restarted the update. This was triggered in part by conversations that we and several other coastal cities had with the state, other coastal jurisdictions, counties as well, about the process of trying to go through a local coastal program update. There were several jurisdictions throughout the state that were attempting major revisions, major updates at around the same time, the 2012 period, and we all had similar experiences. And so there was kind of a shakeup in the leadership team at the Coastal Commission. There were some changes in process that came down. The new ED did a tour of coastal towns and tried to extend an olive branch and said, hey, we really want to work better. We're going to change the way we do business. And so in 2014, we restarted our update. Again, doing this largely on a shoestring budget, which is part of the reason why it took so long. But also, it took so long because at around that same time, I was trying to push my speaker button to advance the slide. At around that same time, the awareness and interest in sea level rise was really starting to, to peak. And so in 2015, we got an LCP grant from the Coastal Commission that we used primarily to develop the background documents for our sea level rise guidance, our vulnerability analyses, our projections, local projections for sea level rise. And so that was a sort of pivot in 2015. We had to spend a lot of time on that. Between 2016 and 2018, we were working on those background documents and sea level rise studies. And then really from 2018 to now, we've been working really closely with the Coastal Commission staff. The changes that were made earlier in the decade really did have an impact. They directed staff to work real closely with us. And so we have had several iterations of review and comment, both from our local office and from the state office, on what you see before you tonight. And so that was a great partnership that developed out of the second half of that decade in working with the Coastal Commission. And so between 2018-22, that closely working with the Coastal Commission staff and using the second grant from the 2018 that we received, we now have before us what I feel like is a fairly decent work product. There's still, some issues. We tried to get this document out as soon as possible. As I'm going through it and reviewing it and looking at it a second time, I'm finding, figures that are mislabeled and that sort of thing. But we wanted to make sure that folks had, as much time as possible to look at it, and the policy is pretty solid at this point. And we're happy to be floating this out for public comment at this point. So, has the public seen this before? This has also been a big theme for a lot of projects, especially long-range planning documents that we're working on, that, people are becoming aware of these documents, they're becoming aware of the process, they're finding out about it, and they're saying, hey, why didn't you let me know before? I didn't know about this. I just went through a decade-long, a 2-decade-long history of trying to get an update to this local coastal program. I personally have been working on this document in its various iterations my entire career here at the City of Arcata. And so this has been a very lengthy process. And yes, absolutely, the public has seen this before. Between starting from most recent and working back in time, and I'm not going to go through the entire history because we'd be here all night. In 21 and 2022, we've had 6 Planning Commission meetings looking primarily at this coastal element. They saw it in each of its pieces during its drafting, and then they saw it most recently last month in the current form that it's in. From 2016 to 2021, I quickly counted the number of public meetings that we had held on sea level rise in particular, and I came to 16. I feel like I've missed several because I just know that there's more than 20. From 2014 to 2018, this was a main topic of our annual study sessions. So the Planning Commission City Council used to annually have a study session. They'd get together and talk about some of the big topics that are going on. And over the last several years, Gateway Area Plan and infill planning in general and local coastal plan was a primary topic at these meetings. And so we've had direction from those study sessions. We've had direction from separate Planning Commission meetings and from City Council meetings. In 2017, we made a big push to do some engagement. We had tabling at tons of events, too many to list. We've also done King Tide events over the last several years. One of the things that I'm proud of, a big initiative that Susan Dill McCarthy in our office worked on was sort of the King Tide photo documentation project that we started. And the state, I have to think, stole our idea because they also have now a statewide photo documentation project for king tides. And it's a great way just to get people interested and thinking about what do these higher elevations of tidal inundation look like in my community. And then we've done at least 3 panel events where I or my staff have been invited to speak to large groups on the work that we're doing or to talk about local coastal planning in general. Again, I feel like I'm missing some of those. In addition, we have a specific e-notification, our listserv that you can get online at cityofarcata.org. Go to the e-notification link in the left-hand side of the hot links there on the main page. You can sign up for an e-notification for the local coastal program. I don't know off the top of my head. I didn't have a chance to research how many people are signed up for that, but we have tens of people signed up for that e-notification. And so that's been a way for us to keep people apprised of progress on the LCP. Okay, well, what is the process moving forward? So we're here today. We've got this one draft document. We're soon to release the coastal zoning ordinance. An ideal time frame, and this is really, I know the council, the planning commission, the public are working on a lot of long-range documents right now, and so this timeline is not fixed in stone. We don't have, like some of the other work we're doing, funding time limits that are driving this. It's taken 15 years of my career to get to the point we're at now. If it takes another 15, this could be my swan song as well. But an ideal scenario would be that, by mid-2022, the PC and CC, the Planning Commission and City Council, are actually reviewing these documents for approval. So you'd have them before you. We've gone through the public engagement. We've revised the documents, and you have them before you so that you can approve them. There was a recent suggestion that you have the Coastal Commission certify them before you approve them by a public member. And so I just want to set the record straight for both the public and the council. The commission will not certify the LCP before you approve them. The process is a little wonky. That would make sense to have this commission give a nod first, and then you can go ahead and approve them. But the way that the process works is that the council has to approve the documents first. They have to authorize the submittal of that document for certification. Once that's done, then the Coastal Commission, California Coastal Commission, will review those documents, schedule them for a hearing, review them with their attorneys, likely come back with recommended modifications. Even though we've worked real closely with staff, the lawyers haven't seen them yet, so I anticipate seeing some changes recommended. And then they will certify with these recommended modifications. And then when the council sees those recommended modifications, they can choose to either act on them and then adopt that modified plan, or as the council did in 2012, you can say, thank you very much. We'll stick with our current local coastal program. It's working well enough. So that'll be your choice come sometime in 2023. And then once you've done that, once you've taken that secondary action, those documents will be approved and effective in the coastal zone. Okay, so that was a lot to digest. I just want to check in and ask if there's questions before I move on to sort of the nuts and bolts of how the coastal zoning works, about timeframes, the history, where we're going.
I just had one quick one. When you said the process is a little wonky with how it goes with us and the Planning Commission, will they have the opportunity to make, since they've been working on it, will they be able to make a recommendation to us?
Absolutely, yeah. The Planning Commission, so over the course of the next several months, we'll have public engagements that are outside of a meeting format like this, and then we'll have several either study sessions or business items before the Planning Commission and the City Council. We'll have a couple of those so that we have good direction on how to revise the document and bring that forward for approval.
Yeah, just to clarify, I think the wonky piece is that, we would love to have certainty from the Coastal Commission before we bring the document, but we can't get that, We do the best we can working with their staff.
Yep.
And so that was actually kind of directly to the question I was about to ask, David. So if the Coastal Commission does not certify, and this might be where you're going next, but if the Coastal Commission does not certify it, what does that process look about updating it? Does it need to be kind of recirculated like a CEQA document or something? And then is that what happened in 2012, just to kind of clarify the language, because it said, because you said coastal certification, and then it needed updates, hundreds of pages of updates, and then we kind of later resumed it, but is that kind of like the same thing that happened in 2012, or was that a different process?
Yeah, no, it was the same process in 2012. The council adopted the Coastal Commission certified with modifications. So they essentially say, we're not going to accept what you submitted, but we are certifying what you submitted plus these hundreds of pages. And we brought that certification back to the council and said, would you like to adopt this document with these modifications? And the council said, no, we don't want to adopt that document. We want to take a different path. And so we've radically shifted how coastal planning is done in the city, and I can talk in more detail, as much gory detail, as a matter of fact, as you wish to, about those changes. I'll touch on sort of the super high level so you have a sense for what it is, but then we can dig into any detail you like. Those are great questions.
I think it's probably a fair assumption that it's, I'm sure we could all assume it's not going to get certified as is, 100% City of Arcata. So it'll probably just be, and I'm not saying that reflects on you, it's just how we see things going with Coastal Commission. So I guess it will just be up to us as what are their directives and changes, and can we work with those?
Yep, and I'll identify some key areas where we're likely at, I want to say risk to see modifications. So I'll identify those for you.
Did you say, so is there more presentation?
Yes, there's more presentation.
Could you please go back to the previous slide? So this is I'm just, processing it really quick, the timeline.
Yeah, and I can, we'll make this available online for folks we'll post it as a PDF on our LCP page so folks can go back and review it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so a little bit about the nuts and bolts. How does this thing work? Okay, so the first thing to understand is that the local coastal program only regulates land use in the coastal zone. That may seem, too basic, but I just want to be real clear, and this actually causes some consternation for people who are living on one side of the coastal zone versus the other because their neighbor across the street isn't subject to the regulations they are. And so the LCP is an added body of regulation that only occurs in the coastal zone. This concept actually led to one of the major changes in the way that we are proposing to regulate land uses in the coastal zone. Right now, the city has, I'll get to that in a second. So hold on to that thought. We have a major pivot in the way that we will regulate or propose to regulate based on this concept that it's only effective in the coastal zone. And just to describe the rest of this graphic here, it's the city of Arcata aerial image. The red line is the city boundary. The blue line is the coastal zone boundary. And I'm not sure why this blue line is here. That just represents the coastline, I guess. But the coastal zone actually goes bayward. Okay, so this is, again, the city. Here's downtown where you can barely see this little star. That's downtown. So the downtown area is just outside the coastal zone boundary. This thick dark line is the boundary itself. And then the city boundary is kind of hard to see, but it's this dashed line that goes around. And so I just want to describe to you a little bit more detail about some of the complexities in the coastal zone and what the local coastal program actually regulates. So the area that's on the inboard side of that thick black line is the inland zone. Again, this is the opposite of what I just said. The LCP doesn't regulate anything in the inland zone. It doesn't affect anything in the inland zone. We don't crack the book. We don't look at this local coastal element, and we don't look at the zoning for the inland zone for the LCP. There's a whole other area that we would block out, the Coastal Commission jurisdiction. So this is retained jurisdiction. It's where the Coastal Commission did not delegate authority to the city to regulate land uses in the coastal zone. So if you live in or operate in or want to do a project in the lower blacked out zone, the Coastal Commission jurisdiction, you actually go to the state to get that coastal development permit. If you are anywhere in between the inland zone that's blacked out and the Coastal Commission jurisdiction zone that's blacked out, you would come to the city for a local coastal program or for a coastal development permit.
Can I just give a quick example of this because it's very recent? So we've been working with Hambro on a CRV buyback. They made it through the city's planning commission and got their city permit, but they needed to go to the coastal commission to get the coastal permit. That is in that dark kind of black zone there that the city could not issue the coastal development permit for. Had they been a few blocks up and a few blocks over, then we would have handled both the coastal development permit and their planning permit.
Yeah, it's a really, really great point. When we were discussing...
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
The Hambro project?
Okay.
It's down in this Coastal Commission jurisdiction retained zone. The site where it's happening is down there, and so they had to go to the Coastal Commission for their coastal development permit. We couldn't issue one.
Okay.
So that's why they're going through a two-step process.
Thank you.
So, so this area right here, this little area right here, this little tiny sliver, and then this box here, the majority of which is agricultural lands, are the only areas in which our local coastal program is in effect. I don't have the parcel count, but let's say it's about 200 parcels, okay? which is part of the rationale the council used last time in 2012 when they decided that the overbearing changes that were recommended weren't worth adopting, in particular because of the complexities that it would create for having the land use code, basically 2 land use codes that were different, which is another piece that led to the pivot that we made, and so hold on to that bit too. So our local coastal program actually only affects a very small proportion of the city. And I'll dig into what those gray areas are in just a moment. Okay, so city issues coastal development permits in these areas. Coastal Commission issues them in that area, and it's not effective in the inland zone.
Can I ask a quick question, David?
Sure.
How is it decided that, or why does the Coastal Commission retain that jurisdiction, especially, in parts that are critical to, Arcata's infrastructure and, within city limits as well? Is it just more coastal, or why is that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It ties to the Coastal Act. The Coastal Act authorizes delegating Coastal Act jurisdiction and authority to jurisdictions unless they meet certain criteria, and it primarily has to do with waterways. And so you'll see this, this is the slough channel, for example, this little sliver here. And so they retain jurisdiction in the bay, everything within 300 feet of the bay line, which gobbles up, our important infrastructure down there, and then up the slough channel. So yeah, that's embedded in the Coastal Act. That's a great question, because we'd love for them.
I guess it says they use the Coastal Act right on there, but thank you for elaborating.
Yeah.
What was the question again?
I asked just how does the Coastal Commission decide what remains within their jurisdiction, even if it's within the city limits of Arcata? So looking at that bottom black section.
And what was the answer?
The Coastal Commission defaults to the Coastal Act, which defines which areas can be delegated, and only these wide areas can be delegated.
Okay.
And it follows like waterways, which I think is the helpful way to look at it. Like that's where the slough kind of comes up and follows along like South G there. So that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So this may be a little too granular, but I want to present it to you. If this goes way over your head, don't worry about it. If it rings true for you, great, and we'll come back to it. So the coastal zone is a little bit more complicated than what I just showed you. I've masked out or blacked out again this area, Coastal Commission jurisdiction, approximate boundaries. There's the slough. Here's the area, that's bayward. And the black line again represents the coastal zone boundary. Basically, the Coastal Commission says, hey, look, there are certain areas that, are already developed. There's no ag resources, there's no coastal access resources, there's really nothing in there that will be affected by coastal resources. And so they adopted throughout the state and jurisdictions these categorical exclusion areas. So categorically, without question, certain activities within those areas are excluded from the requirements of a coastal development permit. There's a whole list of different items. I won't go through them now because it's not important to this discussion. I can certainly bring that information back if you're interested. But all of these grayed out areas are areas the Coastal Commission said, yeah, those are disturbed. We're not terribly worried about activities in those zones. And one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle for us, and again, this is another reason why we need to be cautious about updating this document, is that permitted uses, or otherwise known as principally permitted uses or principally allowable uses that are in these designations do not require a coastal development permit. And so single family home in a residential zoning district, no coastal development permit in this grade area. The parcel next door that's not grade, you have to come and get a coastal development permit. You're seeing some of South G Street here. So these properties that have, some of them are zoned residential, some of them are zoned industrial. If they want to do an industrial use here and they're building a new building in this area, it would be principally permitted and therefore no coastal development permit. So to extend the analogy that City Manager Deemer brought up earlier, the Hambro project is somewhere right around where the pointer tip is here. So it's in the Coastal Commission's retained jurisdiction. They were required to go to the Coastal Commission and get a coastal development permit. And had they been located in this gray area, just a couple hundred feet north of them, they wouldn't have required a coastal development permit at all, not from the city, not from the state. So it's a really powerful tool. And as we change our coastal zoning ordinance, because this powerful tool references the current coastal zoning ordinance, we need to be careful about how we transition between where we're at now with the existing zoning and where we're moving to with the new zoning. If you have questions about that, I can dig into that in a little more detail, but we don't want to lose the ability to allow principally permitted uses to not have to get a coastal development permit.
This might, maybe be an hour-long conversation for another time, but I mean, does the Coastal Commission or this document have any metrics for, how do these boundaries fluctuate with sea level rise, or do they change? Because then if your coastline is 5 feet closer now, are you still allowed to have the same developments here? Does that change? Do we have even metrics to measure that yet?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's certainly been a conceptual discussion for the last, 7-8 years that we've been having. I don't know that the state has come out with, definitive solution on that or proposal. And I am absolutely certain I've got a magic 8-ball, and all sides of the little thing inside of it say cities are going to have something to say about that. And so don't know exactly what that's going to look like at this point. I suspect the Coastal Commission is going to want to have creep. They're going to want to move that boundary. And I suspect that cities are going to want to push back on that. And that's probably a legislative fix to the Coastal Act that's needed, or at least the discussion around it is needed. Yeah.
Thank you for the short version.
I could go on longer if you want. Okay, so that arrow is where was intended to show you where these CADX areas are. That's one example of them. We'll come back to this arrow because many of you may be recognizing on the map that this arrow, this box area here also overlaps with the gateway area, so we'll touch on that a little bit. Okay, so Table 2-1 in the LCE, the local coastal element, identifies the different zoning types. Okay, so here's the pivot that I've been talking about. This is the really ingenious thing that we've done with this revision to the local coastal program that allows us to kind of have our cake and eat it too. One of the big problems with the 2012 process was we took our land use code, our 4-inch document that has tons and tons of regulation, in all kinds of gory detail, tons of minutia in there, and we said we want you to adopt this as our local coastal program document, which would have been great because then we have one document. No matter what side of the line you're on, it's one document. You flip through the pages, you can tell everybody the same thing. Right now, we currently have 2 documents. We have the LUDGI, Land Use and Development Guide, that was adopted in '94, and we have the Land Use Code that was adopted in 2008. And so we're constantly struggling to make those 2 things work together. So the Coastal Commission was comfortable with this 4-book approach, basically a 4-book approach where you have 2 general plans and 2 land use codes, and and they extolled the virtues of it. But as a practitioner, trying to apply that in practice, it's just insane. I mean, I'm not going to mince my words. It's crazy making, and it drives staff nuts and the public. And so what we've done is recognizing that the coastal zone is geographically bounded by certain features. We adopted an approach of using overlay zones, or what our land use code calls combining zones. So on the bottom here, there's an image, and maybe it's hard to see on the screen here. Hopefully it's better on your local screens. But here's a city that has a zoning district. This is not our city. This is just prototypical city, let's say. And they have this yellow zoning district. This is what we would call a base zone. It's their R1. That typically means it's residential 1 or residential low density. Within a portion of that R1 zoning district, they have this WP overlay zone, or a wellhead protection overlay zone. And you can see in the figure 1 here, it says a wellhead protection overlay has special provisions in addition to the requirements of the base municipal zones in order to protect nearby wells from contaminants. And so an overlay zone, or a combining zone, can essentially add on to the existing regulation that you have in your underlying zone. So this was the first pivot. We adopted our land use code citywide. We did that years ago. For a long time, while we were trying to work through the coastal zoning process, we said, well, it's only applicable in the inland portions. After the 2012 experience, we said, forget this, we're just adopting it citywide. So land use code is applicable citywide now. It's not certified by the coastal zone, so it's not the standard for a coastal development permit. If we were to use that as a standard for a coastal development permit, that would be the basis for an appeal, and we would lose because it's not certified. The proposal for this local coastal element, and the zoning will follow suit, is to have these overlay zones. And so the way we designate them in the land use code is by starting with a colon and then initials for the name of the zone type it is. So you see on the very top of this table here, coastal resource and open space lands. That has a designation of :CROS, and that can be combined with any other underlying zone within the city, within the coastal zone, and we would restrict these to things like natural resource lands. Okay, so I'll show you a cartoon, and you're gonna have to forgive my graphics because...
Can I ask a really quick, just clarifying, to make it simple question? So basically, in this table here on 2.1, all of these coastal zonings are overlay with what already exists, and it creates a new, double zoning, basically.
Yep. So they float on top, like this WP zone does. It floats on top of the other underlying zoning. And essentially what we're proposing is to have this overlay zone certified by the Coastal Commission and then retain our underlying zoning. And we're baking into this overlay zone everything the Coastal Commission wants to see over that several year period where we worked closely with the coastal staff, and we went line by line through this document, the various iterations, the 3 or 4 revisions to this document that we had with Coastal Commission staff. The talking point was always, do you absolutely need to see this in your review of our document to determine that it's compatible with the Coastal Act? And if they said, no, we don't need to see that, we jettisoned it. We removed it from the coastal zoning, and we left it in our land use code. So we still have control. We still have local control to regulate those uses. We just aren't offering up that local control as an appealable item to the Coastal Commission. Does that make sense? We're kind of going with the base, whatever the very bare minimum is that they feel like they need to see. Okay, so here's my, don't laugh, I drew this. Don't laugh. So here's my example of how this would work. Here's Spear, here's Alliance. This is that chunk that I said up in the northern part of the city that's in the coastal zone, and I said most of it is agriculture. Here's that big agricultural parcel. Our underlying zoning for this parcel is AE, stands for Agricultural Exclusive. We would add to that this :CA, which is Coastal Agricultural. And so we would mirror those underlying zonings. Most of the underlying zonings and overlay zones have a direct one-for-one correlation. And so the Planning Commission made a suggestion to upzone this whole purple area, and in fact this green area, to residential medium density. So moving from what currently is low density and very low density, upzone that all to residential medium density as a way to provide for future growth and development in the coastal zone in an area that's centrally located within the city. So this whole area, this was from the presentation I made to them, where the staff suggestion was to have residential medium on Alliance and then reserve coastal residential very low on Spear. They said, no, we want the whole kit and caboodle. So the purple boundary will go to extend to this whole thing in the upcoming zoning, and you'll see that reflected in the land use maps that are in this document here.
Who said that they want the whole thing?
Excuse me?
Who said that they want the whole thing?
The Planning Commission.
Okay. So what is, right now it's low density? Is that what you said?
Yeah, the yellow is residential low density, and the green is residential very low density.
So that looks like basically single-family homes, right?
Single-family homes.
So then what does medium density look like?
Medium density would look like either more tightly clustered single-family homes or potentially apartment buildings.
Shouldn't we just get rid of all the low-density zoning in the city?
That's certainly a policy decision the council can make. You know, certain jurisdictions, Berkeley, for example, eliminated low-density zoning. Some people have made the claim that the state's SB 9 and accessory dwelling unit laws have effectively eliminated single-family zoning. So we haven't gotten that feedback yet, so we haven't proposed it. But that's certainly something the council can take a look at. Okay, so comfortable with the concept of overlay zones?
What's the CA?
CA is coastal agricultural.
Okay.
And that would be an overlay on top of the agricultural exclusive zoning district that we have underlying in the land use code. Okay, so jumping back real quick to this categorical exclusionary so I can tie the bow together on the gateway. This issue has come up as well. You know, how do these things relate? There's some overlap in the zone. You know, what's going on with that? So this area right here is part of the gateway area. It's the part that's in the Coastal Commission's boundary. So looking at this, you know, this is not directly overlaid. This little zigzag here, this little heartbeat, is this heartbeat right here, the jag in the coastal zone boundary. And this little drop here, you see over here, this blue line rather, is the coastal zone boundary. The yellow line is the gateway area boundary. Creamery District is right here. So zooming in a little bit on what that looks like on the ground, this whole area in the gateway area is in the coastal zone, and it's in the Cat X area. So right now, any activity on these parcels that's principally permitted does not require a coastal development permit. Part of the driving force behind the gateway area plan, as directed by prior councils, and you know the council's experience and planning commission's experience with development projects over the last 10 years or so. The concept is to work through the community planning now and then make most uses that conform to that community plan principally permitted. So once they're principally permitted, if they meet the design standards and they have they meet the amenities that are required from the plan set, then they would go straight to the building counter. We have complete control over that on the north part of this in the city inland zone where the LCP doesn't apply. So we can decide to do that here, and there's no other review authority. To propose the changes that we're proposing in the gateway area, the Coastal Commission is going to have to say, yes, we approve of those, we certify that. So that's going to have to be a certified local coastal program update. What we're proposing right now is to separate those two things in time. The local coastal program that is before you tonight and the coastal zoning ordinance portion of it that will come before you shortly does not have any mention of the gateway area. It changes the zoning and the land use designation so that they're mixed use in designation, which allows for the uses that are ongoing in that zone right now. So it better reflects what the existing uses are. But it doesn't propose to incorporate any of the conversation that we're having around the gateway area at all at this point. That is I mean, both of these documents make, big changes, but that change is completely outside of the concept of anything that's in our current land use code. So we can't have an overlay that's going to mirror what the gateway is. And so it's going to require a secondary update. Now, some people have suggested, well, why don't you just slow down and submit them all at the same time? And we certainly can do that. I feel like there's a lot of policy in this document that, is great policy that we'd love to start using as soon as humanly possible. And I would like to get the Coastal Commission reviewing this document, to pay for the submittal so that their lawyers will start looking at this document. And if they are able to approve it before, the gateway plan catches up or the other changes in the general plan catch up, then we can come back with another LCP amendment and bring that gateway planning into this area. But we don't want to lose this principally permitted categorical exclusion area. That was a lot to take in. Does that make sense? Are there questions around that?
It's a lot.
We would stagger, the take-home messages, we would stagger LCP updates, local coastal program updates, so that the gateway area plan can go on its own timeline and the LCP can go on its.
Yeah, I get that, because it's been so long since it's been updated. We'd like to move forward and be able to do some work.
I think it's a principally permitted thing. That's, I think, what most people have been having issues with, right?
I think there's a lot of...
a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of confusion around, principally permitted uses, principally permitted activities, the authority that staff have to approve projects, and the relationship between the community planning process that's going on in the gateway and the standard issuance of, building permits, for example, encroachment permits, other examples of things that are, already allowed in a principally permitted way. And certainly that's a policy decision too. I mean, frankly, right now, there in most places throughout the city, there are very few places throughout the city where you would be required to have any kind of planning permit to build a single family house. That's not true of all jurisdictions. Some cities say we want a discretionary review of every single development. Everything that comes through, we're going to have a planning commission, a city council meeting, the public are going to come out, and so if you want to do an addition onto your home, we're going to a hearing about it, and that's a policy decision. I feel like Arcata has tried to balance the need for, permit streamlining and the ability to get things done in the jurisdiction in the community against the neighbor's right to know and participate. And so that's an ongoing discussion. But we can certainly have a whole breakout session on what types of decisions are principally permitted, how those processes work, what those different processes are, who's in the decision-making chain for them, how the public has access to appeals, and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, that would be something not tonight, but at a future time. I would really appreciate going into that. Thank you.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. Okay, so LCP amendment to follow the gateway plan adoption is staff's proposal. That's certainly going to be the council's to the council's discretion. As I mentioned earlier, there's no timeline for this. If it takes another 15 years, it'll make me sad. I will shed a tear. I guarantee it. But I will studiously move forward with that.
David, so if we're in the process then of amending it, to coincide with the gateway plan, does that need to then be recertified or approved by the Coastal Commission? And is that basically a similar process? They just have less to review? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's a key point. I mean, we're already doing a comprehensive update. Almost invariably, folks will go through a comprehensive update of their planning documents in their jurisdiction, and for all intents and purposes, nothing changes. You'll see land use maps replicate over time. Every land use map that I look back on, going back to the 50s that the city of Arcata has adopted, it started out with, well, what's there now? Okay, well, that's the land use that it's going to be designated when we adopted our first land use codes. And then every successive update, with very minor modification, just nibbling around the edges, the idea is, well, what's it zoned now? Instead of what's there now, what's it zoned now, regardless of what's there now, because those uses changed over time. Well, let's just do that because it's simple. It's easy to do the analysis on. And so I think for the Coastal Commission's purposes, if we give them that, even if we had them ready to submit simultaneously, I would still recommend we do them in separate chunks. Here, do the easy part. That's basically, for the most part, just replicating what we have existing. And then when you're done with that update, let's go back around and do this more detailed review on this fairly significant change in the way we do business. Okay, That was my check-in. There's more. This is the optional part about the local coastal program, and I know you've absorbed a lot. I can do a super high-level sweep over this. I can cut it short. We can come back to that. It's totally to your discretion.
Well, and I think we've kind of just been chatting among us tonight and saying, I think it would be really helpful to maybe have, in the future, a study session with the Planning Commission about this, just an additional meeting where this is where we really can dig into the meat of it, because, this has been a good high-level overview that we're now getting a little more into, though the hour is getting a little late, but not that late. But I think, a dedicated meeting to really dig into this would be something that I would really enjoy, and to get the Planning Commission's feedback, because they've seen it so many times too, and are a lot more updated and have dug into it a lot more than we have. So yeah. I think that would be really great.
I would really appreciate that as well. Great suggestion.
I'm told that this is the only time I get to ask questions is during these council meetings, so I'd really like as much information as possible. And I do have a lot of questions, but I was just going to wait till the end.
Okay. Do you want to answer questions or
whatever you want to do?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer a question.
Well, I don't know if you're going to cover some of this stuff, I guess.
Well, I guess I'm doing a check-in and just trying to assess whether to go on to maybe a straw poll. Do you want me to go on to look the sea level rise component, or should we save that for a special study session? Or
I would like Councilmember Watson to ask his questions, and then we can reassess and see what time it is, and then maybe save that last part for another time, if that is okay with everybody.
Because I think probably he's covered, correct me if I'm wrong, probably everything that was in our packet, and so all your questions would be relevant now. And then the sea level rise is something extra that we didn't.
It's digging into a little bit more detail about one of the chapters in the packet.
Okay.
It's been of particular interest to the community.
Okay, so maybe, because that is a very important part, so maybe we do the questions now and then we see where we are, so we don't just kind of skim over that. I think that's what Councilmember.
It's a lot of information to absorb. I want to make sure I'm fresh for you.
All right.
Spate of information.
Yeah, again, this is the only time I get.
No, it's totally fine. That's what we're just saying is like that, so we can gauge. We don't want to. You should be able to ask your questions, and we also want to be able to, really learn about the other part. So we'll just see how it goes.
Yeah, nobody's trying to curtail your time, but for people that are tuning in, if it's going to go I'd want everybody to be able to.
Yeah, but the meeting's recorded, right? That's the beauty of the meeting being recorded, so we can go back and watch it. That helps me.
Why don't you just ask your questions, and then we'll see what happens. We'll see where we are after that.
All right. It seems like you're upset. I'm sorry.
I'm not.
Okay.
Can I just, and the idea that, as you can see, we're simmering a little here, so the idea of being fresh for new information does sound enticing to me.
Okay.
But ask away, yes.
A question about the sewer treatment plant upgrade. The city's planning to upgrade the sewage treatment plant in its current location in order to protect the plant. Some new fill in the bay and maybe even in the marsh would probably need to happen. Is that right?
The local coastal program doesn't explicitly address the sewage treatment plant. And the sewage treatment plant upgrades are there's a two-phase approach, and Nature and Karen could probably speak more to that process. We've currently submitted for phase 1 to the Coastal Commission for a coastal development permit. And the sea level rise analysis that's associated with that phase 1 piece, as well as looking forward to phase 2, is included in that application. What the sea level rise policy does propose in this document is to have a phased, what we call a measured retreat. What a lot of people will, correct you if you say measured retreat. There's a lot of different terms for it, but I won't go into that. But the idea is that we have low-lying lands that are, basically, either baylands or former baylands, and then we have kind of the G&H Street zone that is, a fill area. It's been filled above the elevation of the bay, and in that fill area, there's a lot of investment, public and private. And so the measured retreat strategy, would be to fall back on those low-lying lands and release those first. that would be more expensive to protect and have less, resources behind them to protect, and then you focus that protection on the G&H Street segment, and then ultimately, as if sea level rise continues as projected, we would ultimately have to fall back from there as well. And so this idea of like taking steps over time to continue to protect, it's not new protection. I mean, you can see the ox ponds here. Can't really see the South G&H Street really well, but it's elevated above. It's high and dry, even in this 25-year event. And so, continue to protect the South G&H streets, and then ultimately, if need be, we would fall back from there as well. There's also some creative zoning that we're doing in there to try and create new uses that have less of a development footprint, a development impact that would be easier to retreat from in the future.
So are there... are there things that we need to do to protect the treatment plant from sea level rise that wouldn't currently be allowed by the state?
I think our current submittal to the Coastal Commission makes the assessment that for the the life of the plant, the economic life of the plant, that we are capable and able to, both through the development proposal in raising floor elevations and in ultimately potentially adding defensive structures, whether they're eco levees or berms or seawalls, to protect that plant for the entire economic life of the plant.
Can you say that last part again?
Yeah, the plant can be protected for its entire economic life.
Okay. And it's all within the state guidelines?
I'm saying it's within the state guidelines?
No, I'm asking. Like it's currently allowed under the Coastal Commission rules, what we want to do to protect it in its economic life.
I believe that it is. I've seen other treatment plants. I mean, and again, this is not necessarily in the treatment plant, but expanding it more broadly to, to the zone in general. The Coastal Commission has authorized projects that have, fallback levees, or treatment plants that have been protected with certain trigger points for removal of assets, so that there is precedent for it. I will say that the sea level rise strategy the city is proposing is one that is, in that risk category of being challenged by the state. But I also think that prior councils and the community at large has looked at the the Coastal Commission's policy direction and has rejected that, and it has suggested that we follow this approach instead, that attempts to retain those assets for as long as it's feasible to do so, and to be developing the systems and structures and policies during that next 30, 40, 50-year period to then retreat, as opposed to creating policies that are effectively no-build policies that cause a de facto retreat and blight creation now.
Okay. Yeah, it's hard for me to type, so it's going to take me a little bit to decipher my own notes here, but I'm going to do my best. The draft plan promises that permits for new development in areas likely to be flooded by sea level rise will include conditions of approval that require owners to acknowledge that they understand the city may withdraw protective measures once sea levels rise too high. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I don't have the policy number. I can look it up if we need to. But yeah, in effect, there are measures that will be implemented that provide notice to folks that wish to do development in that zone. At this point, creating a we don't have a funding stream to create a levy around this entire zone. And so we would need to develop that over time, and how predictable that funding stream is, whether it's, a tax or grants or whatever the case may be, is uncertain. And so we may project that we can protect to, let's say, 17 feet of sea level rise. And that's our best estimate of what we can do. But it's, it's in a zone that has a lot of uncertainty. And so if, sea level rise, is much more rapid than we anticipate, and the area is, subject to inundation prior to being able to develop those resources, then no protection will be granted. And so there are coastal policies right now that significantly limit the types of development that can be protected with, with armoring. And we believe that the interpretation, the correct interpretation, is that the zone 1 in the map is itself development, and that predated the Coastal Act. And so it's an allowable piece of infrastructure for that protection. So that's sort of the basis that we're going off of.
So just to clarify it a little bit further down, so what I think I hear you saying is that if we kind of went in the line of thinking at the Coastal Commission, we would be retreating out of that area very soon, which would be well before there was possible sea level rise, and then creating blight because it would be basically an abandoned area. And we're arguing that and saying that we should be allowed to hold out as long as we want to in that area, as long as people are aware of what's to come. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that's a great way to summarize it.
Just trying to keep it simple.
Yeah. Yep.
And then would that acknowledgement be attached to property deeds?
Yeah, I believe that's what our current policy recommendation is. And that's going to, I'll just be frank, that's going to create a cloud on title. That's going to affect the way that lending institutions, insurance companies, other investors view the property. And so that's certainly a policy decision that I think the council needs to be aware of. I think the damage of that cloud on title is less than the damage of telling someone you can't rebuild if you have, a fire, or you can't expand, you can't invest in your property. I think that would be have significant impact on not only the area but the city as a whole. To have basically a whole area where you say, look, we're divesting of, this area.
Is there anything that actually requires the city to withdraw protection from those properties when the cost of protecting them rise too high?
There's nothing that requires us to withdraw protection, no. But I think if the city doesn't have the financial resources, or if it no longer remains a viable area to invest in, to protect, I don't see why the decision makers would decide to protect it anyway. So that's why the policy is developed that way.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of maybe part of the next one is there anything that would hold future city councils to non-mandatory policies in the 2022 local coastal program?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Is there anything that would hold future councils to non-mandatory policies in the 2022 local coastal program?
Is there anything that would hold future councils to non-mandatory policies?
Yeah.
Well, the policies are not non-mandatory. They are mandatory. Yeah, the policies are, if you adopt them, then that's how we implement them.
Okay.
What that policy specifically says is that we would provide constructive notice to people who develop in this zone that there's no guarantee that the water isn't going to be lapping at your doorstep in 30 years or 10. We don't know. And no, future councils, this council can adopt this tomorrow. Well, they can't adopt it tomorrow. You can adopt this, and then you could decide a week later we're going to make changes and adopt something different. So nothing, to answer the question you didn't ask, nothing holds future councils to implement these mandated policies. They can change their mind.
The draft LCP mentions that cost-benefit calculations would help the city decide when it will be time to withdraw investments to continue to protect property and infrastructure in areas likely to be flooded by sea level rise. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and so part of that evaluation is, and this is dated information, but we were looking at this, I think in 2016, we assessed the value of both public and private infrastructure at about $140 million, and the cost to protect to, I believe it was 17 feet, to be $15 million. And so this was a little bit back of the napkin. It was just, this is not engineered. This is not a robust study. This was just trying to get a sense for, is it ridiculous to try and protect this area, or does it kind of make sense? And based on what we know, it kind of makes sense. I don't believe this included the sales tax value of the area as well, and the sales tax value that comes out of this area is pretty significant.
Is there anything that would require the city to do that? Like, let me see. To withdraw, let me see.
No.
Yeah. To withdraw investments to continue to protect property and infrastructure?
No, there's nothing that would require the city to do that.
Could a future city council decide to keep protecting vulnerable areas even if the costs to do that are really, really high?
That's what the council does. Yeah, they make those decisions. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But again, just to be clear, this is all predicated on if the Coastal Commission certifies this plan that we're talking about.
Yeah, and in fact, the great irony of all of this consternation over sea level rise is that the majority of the areas that would receive sea level rise protective structures are in this Coastal Commission retained jurisdiction. And the Coastal Commission doesn't look at our local coastal program when they issue a coastal development permit in the city of Arcata. They look at the Coastal Act and they say, does this comply with the Coastal Act? And so what this is, in effect, is our statement of how we believe that coastal resources should be regulated in the city of Arcata. I mean, again, there's a very narrow band of properties that this whole effort even pertains to. And so, and almost none of that area is going to receive a berm or, eco-levee or any kind of protective structure. So almost all of this is basically just our statement of how we think that sea level rise should be handled. And when we make our submittals to Coastal Commission, we would reference those, those documents. But this is, somewhat contentious. The Coastal Commission may look at this and say, hey, look, we're afraid we're going to set a precedent if we let Arcata do it. Maybe it makes sense in Arcata even. But we don't want, Malibu to think that they can do it. And so, and the Coastal Commission has a very strong bias in precedent. So, it's likely they will come back and say, well, no, we can't certify the document this way. You have to take this entire sea level rise section out and replace it with, this. We have worked with our local coastal staff on this section. They've advised us that they are unclear, what the lawyers will, ultimately say, the Coastal Commission lawyers, who are focused on precedent. But they have helped us to create a document, to create language that is, if there's any language that could be certified in these local coastal staff's opinion, this language could be. And so it's a gamble. This is the area of risk, the biggest area of risk.
What would be allowed on private land and coastal agricultural zones? Would the new coastal agricultural zoning for the few large privately owned lands in the area that are likely to be flooded by sea level rise allow for all of the same uses that agricultural zoning in the rest of the city currently allows?
The ag actually is a there's a special place in the Coastal Act's heart for ag resources. We have a chapter on it, chapter 12, And just to summarize, basically the types of activities that you see occurring on those ag lands now would be able to continue. And all other types of agricultural uses that you typically associate with agricultural uses could continue. There are certainly some limitations on development so that they be directly related to agricultural uses. But for the most part, ag uses are supported and, encouraged.
Would it allow like large industrial scale agricultural processing factories?
No, I think we have some.
Because I think that those are allowed right now in Arcata's agricultural zones.
I guess it depends on what you define as.
So like maybe Cypress Grove is an example. They're allowed to build their factory in an ag zone.
Let me dig into the policy in a little bit more detail and get back to you on that. I don't want to speak off the cuff.
Okay. And another question is,
I will point you to the policies in Chapter 12, in particular 12.2.10, 12.2.9, 12.2.8, and 12.2.11. So 8 through 11, 12.2.8 through 11. Yeah, in the attachment, it's on packet page 135.
Would it allow like industrial scale aquaculture facilities?
Again, I'm going to have to defer until I research that. I believe that there are limits on the amount of soil you can cover with structures.
Okay.
That would probably prevent those kinds of uses.
The draft gateway area plan would allow the highest buildings on the south end of the gateway area, which is in the categorical exclusion area of the coastal zone. Would that mean that only the city would need to approve a coastal development permit for rezoning in big new housing developments there?
I would have to unpack the question to address it in full, but the answer is no. Primarily just because of the way the question was asked. But if development is proposed, that we're currently reviewing for the gateway area plan is adopted and certified, then presumably there would be no coastal development permit in that area.
Okay, so the Coastal Commission wouldn't need to approve it.
The Coastal Commission doesn't currently have authorization authority in that zone, and currently principally permitted uses in this CADX area do not require a coastal development permit. They're not appealable to the Coastal Commission. They are appealable to the council.
If the city would give ministerial approval under the gateway plan, could the city give ministerial approval for a coastal development permit?
Yes. And in fact, one of the provisions in the LCE is to create a CDP waiver process similar to what the Coastal Commission has. Instead of requiring every project to have a coastal development permit, if it can be found that the project doesn't have an impact on coastal resources, that can go through a CDP waiver project instead of a coastal development permit process. So yes, that is accurate as to what's proposed.
The draft plan addresses coastal recreational access, but it seems only to refer to wheelchair access for people with mobility problems. It doesn't say much about access or interpretive signage for people with other types of disabilities. Will more be added?
I don't know that that's true.
Okay.
I'd have to look into that. I think there are actually, there's policy language that talks about accessibility. I'd have to find that for you. I can't do that off the cuff. And then in addition, we're not precluded from, other laws that are, that projects would still be required to follow, such as ADA.
Did you, I think you already covered this, but could you just remind me, what was the time frame for when the draft coastal zoning code will be released to the public?
The zoning ordinance? I don't have an estimate for that. We just got an admin draft today.
Okay.
I'd like, the opportunity to review it before it's released, and then when it's released, it'll be well before, anyone is making, decisions on it for sure. There'll be plenty of time.
And then I was just still, wanted some clarification on how all these documents kind of overlap with each other, and how they'll be adopted.
In brief, the Gateway Area Plan is an element of the general plan. It has a zoning component that has not yet been released that will be adopted into the municipal code. The general plan will encompass all of the edits and updates and new elements, and then including on a separate track, the local coastal element. And then the coastal zoning ordinance would function as an overlay zone to the land use code, which would include as a component the gateway zoning when it's adopted.
I was looking at page 69, I think.
69 of the
I think of the packet.
CLUI or packet page 69?
Let me see. Yeah, I think the packet page 69. Could you give more details on the different permit layers? Specifically about the areas seeking a permit from the Coastal Commission versus going directly to the city?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Can you share some of the details regarding the different permit layers? Specifically the areas seeking a permit from the Coastal Commission versus going directly to the city, in the appeals area versus non-appeals area.
So I think that was the first portion of the presentation, and this slide here I think shows it pretty well. It shows the areas that's really defined geographically that Coastal Commission has retained their jurisdiction, that dark area on the bottom and then up the slough channel, and then the zones that are outside of the dark area on this slide are those areas where the city issues permits. And then the gray in the city's area are areas that the Coastal Commission has deemed do not require, are categorically exempt from coastal development permits.
Thank you. I guess I can, if you already explained, I can go back and watch it too. Do you know how many acres in the Gateway area will remain within the Coastal Commission permit retaining jurisdiction versus the acres that will be considered more ministerial?
The acres that would be in the retained jurisdiction?
Yeah.
0.
0 acres.
Yeah,
Right.
0. So, sorry, let's see. Well, okay, there's a sliver, but this is in the slough. There's basically no development potential in there, and so I don't have that number for you. I'm going to say fewer than 3.
Okay.
It's about a block in length and about a half a block in width. Maybe my engineer friend can calculate that into acres. And that's located right here. But otherwise, this portion that's in the CADX area and about half of this portion that's in the CADX area is in the Gateway area and in the obviously in the coastal zone, and then this portion is in the Gateway area, but is in the retained jurisdiction. The only projects I can envision happening in that retained jurisdiction would be habitat restoration.
Okay. There was a recently released 2022 sea level rise technical report that came out from NOAA. And I was just wondering if staff's had a chance to review that, if you had any comments on it.
Yeah, we're reviewing it right now, as well as the IPCC report that was mentioned earlier that came out this week. Sea level rise is bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, then I was going to ask if the report affected anything related to our coastal hazard section and the SLR sections.
we are still assessing that, so I don't want to say definitively, but the structure of the city's proposed sea level rise adaptation is time independent. So it's based on elevations as opposed to elevations of sea level triggering certain retreat steps, as opposed to identifying a time frame at which point the sea would be at a certain elevation. There's so much speculation around that, and it depends on what model you use, and again, we'll get into this in detail at a later time, but and then the models are constantly changing. They're constantly being updated, and it's always getting worse. It's never getting better. And so, we certainly have to, in particular, because of the way the Coastal Commission reviews, permits to them, when we're submitting permits to the Coastal Commission, they're going to ask for that analysis. And I think it's something that's going to be of interest to us locally as well. But it makes more sense to identify thresholds than it does to identify years when those years are constantly changing. The elevations don't change.
Okay. Do we need to revisit or update our SRL evaluation and vulnerability analysis?
What was the first part of the question?
Do we need to revisit or update it?
No, it's pretty consistent with the recent work that, so the vulnerability analysis, we had two approaches addressing slightly different elements of vulnerability. One was done by Alderon Laird, and one was done by Northern Hydrology Engineering. And the one done by Northern Hydrology basically took the same models that the IPCC uses and that are relied on as sort of the industry standard, and ran them for our local coastline, so for Arcata Bay. Because we don't have, a buoy. What do you call it? It's getting late. We don't have a tide gauge. That's what they're called. We don't have a tide gauge, so we don't have published data that the IPCC is running for us. Jeff reran that analysis, and it's not enough time has passed since when we adopted those documents in 2018 to have changed the model.
So I was trying to watch the Planning Commission meeting, and a commissioner had mentioned a conservation project about a lagoon restoration project in Southern California, in San Diego, and said it was an interesting project and approved by everybody on the Planning Commission down there. And do you think that's something maybe worth taking a look at?
Yeah, definitely. I looked at the project. It looks like a really impressive restoration project, and I think it's akin to, on a much grander scale, and with more purpose focused on sea level rise adaptation than some of the work that we've been doing locally that we're also very proud of, for instance, McDaniel Slough and others.
And then I know Baykeeper made a public comment about South G Street still being an area that's envisioned as a place to cluster new development, and that we should be cautious about that. And I'm just wondering, if that's still something we think we should be considering doing, is clustering development down there.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that I don't want to speak for Baykeeper. But I think based on a follow-up conversation that I had, I think that the concern is, hey, I've got this concern, want to know more, want to spend time with the document. At the time that we had the Planning Commission meeting on this document, it had been out for 3 days. And so there hadn't been, in this form, we had the documents out previously with the Planning Commission's review in 2021. So I think it was just, putting forward, hey, this is a concern. We need to think carefully about this. But again, there's there's kind of two broad approaches, I would say, to sea level rise adaptation. One is to say, hey, at some point in the far future, this area is going to be inundated. We don't know exactly when that far future point is, but it's going to be inundated, more than likely. So let's stop development. Let's stop investment in this area today. The other bucket on the opposite end of the spectrum is we're going to defend every lick of land. We're not going to let the sea level rise affect us at all. And I think that, Arcata is taking sort of a midland path where we're saying, we recognize we're going to have some areas that are going to, naturally, reconvert to baylands. As the sea levels progress and rise further, we're going to, eventually transition. We want to continue to see investment in the area and find ways to transition those uses so that instead of having, for example, scrap yards that have contaminants and things that would mobilize in a tsunami, to maybe an RV park. And so we allow future development that has a lower development footprint, lower development impact, that's less affected by sea level rise and periodic inundation, and also easier to retreat. So that's the overall strategy.
Are there any thoughts you have on a more proactive approach to ensuring equitable managed retreat rather than leaving it up to the individual property owners?
Not in a 30-second soundbite.
You can take as long as you need. This is my only time to get questions answered.
That's an area of policy that we definitely need to work on.
I feel like people are frustrated with me, and I apologize, but this is literally the only time I get to get questions answered.
Yeah, no, I'm answering your question, Councilmember Watson. I think that is an important body of policy that needs to be developed with the community. I don't have an off-the-cuff answer for you here, as I do for many of the questions that you've asked.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say the example you gave about the scrapyard versus the RV park, that was really good. Like that was good. Thank you. Broke it down nicely.
I've got a couple of sound bites, but mostly I don't speak in sound bites, and I apologize for that.
Could you explain to me it's on packet page 70, the Coastal Act direction?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Oh, could you explain to me the Coastal Act direction?
Oh, yes. Well, first of all, I'm seeing that this is replicated twice, so we only need it once. So
okay,
that'll
that
be proposed.
that was my next question.
Proposed amendment. But in short, basically, this is just identifying that this is consistent with the policies of Chapter 3 of the Coastal Act. To certify a local coastal program, that local coastal program has to be consistent with Chapter 3. And so this is saying, the policies of Chapter 3 direct the interpretation of the local coastal element. And so if there's any time when there's a question as to how to interpret this, we would interpret it based on the Coastal Act.
Okay, thank you.
We like that policy so much we put it in there twice.
Excellent. I was going to ask, what's the Coastal Resource and Open Space Lands, the CROS designation? It's on packet page 77.
You had a question as just to what is it?
Yeah.
The CROS is one of the overlays that actually collects, it's a bucket for collecting a couple of underlining zoning districts, mostly open space or public facilities or natural resource lands. Instead of creating a category for all of those different types where we don't anticipate seeing any development in the future, we just kind of lump them into one bucket that's like, hey, these are open space and resource lands.
I noticed a lot of language about kind of like visitor facilities and recreational facilities. Is that something that we envision more of in that area?
This is in our current LCP, we don't have much in the way of coastal visitor serving. In fact, we don't have a zone that's designated for it even. And this was something that local coastal staff recommended that we add in because it is a major component of the Coastal Act. And our proposal, our original proposal was completely lacking in commercial visitor serving. Largely because we really have a different kind of coastline than many coastal cities. And so we didn't propose it because we don't have a boardwalk, we don't have a Venice, there's not a lot of shops, sitting right up on the coast. But ultimately, we were using, we reasoned that we could use this coastal commercial visitor serving designation to try and draw those additional land uses that would have a lower impact on the land and make retreat from those lands easier and more viable in the long run. So.
There aren't going to be any alterations of rivers or streams, is there?
Say again?
Alterations of rivers or streams.
All the directions of rivers?
Alterations of rivers or streams.
Is there a provision for altering?
No, are there going to be any?
I anticipate there will be. There's still some segments of creeks that can be restored. As sea level rises, we'll have to put in new infrastructure to manage tidal inundation. We're likely to, need to develop settling ponds and manage the landscape in ways that allow us to manage water flows in the future. There's nothing specifically called out for in the document, though.
What are some of the the biological and ecological concerns?
I don't know. There's ESHA in the coastal zone, and obviously the coast itself, has a lot of sensitive habitats and resources. So the LCP is set up to protect those resources.
So ESHA's the ESHA. Sorry, ESHA, ESHA, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, ESHA, ESHA, that's correct. Environmentally sensitive habitat area is what that stands for. Sorry for the jargon.
I think we already talked about diking, filling, or dredging of the wetlands. We covered that, right?
Not explicitly, but they're not allowed in most situations except for very limited circumstances, and those are regulated by the Coastal Act. And we would extend those to sea level rise protections. There's just no way in certain situations to, you can't put a tide gate in at a higher elevation without filling some wetland.
Okay. So what area is the tidelands?
The tidelands are sorry. On the cover page, on packet page 63, there's a small version of a map that shows the 1870 shoreline, and those are considered to be the former tidelands. approximately 100-plus years ago. They were diked and are now referred to as diked former tidelands. So that's the historic prism. Interestingly, that's the, roughly the current prism if we remove the dikes, and it's also approximates the 6-foot sea level rise scenario prism, just because of the contours of the land around here.
Where's Matthews Dam at?
Matthews Dam is inland.
Yeah, Matthews Dam is in Trinity County, and it is a structure owned by Humboldt Bay Water District that then regulates the water into the Mad River, with which we draw drinking water from underneath.
Okay, I just noticed it mentioned failure of Matthews Dam.
Mm-hmm. We do plan for a failure of that dam because it would come into the north area of Arcata near the hospital, I'll say.
Okay. I think that's good for me. I really appreciate you guys, taking all the time and everything. So, sorry I have so many questions. I appreciate all the work you put into all this stuff, David. Thank you. The beard's coming in nicely.
So, how much, we did get a little bit into sea level rise in that conversation. So is there, I'm just wondering if we should, because we still have a few things on the agenda, maybe if we could just add this last part to our next agenda, and then that way, this was a very robust conversation, so if I know there were some things you were going to come back with answers to, maybe we just could continue this conversation at the next meeting? That seem...
Yeah, either that or the study session that you talked about, either one.
Okay, I think that would be good.
Thank you.
We do have at least one public comment.
Oh yeah, so sorry, we're not moving on yet. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to public comment. We'll take the online public comment first. So let's go ahead.
All right, phone call ending in 5288. Is that Kent?
That's Kent. Thank you for my opportunity to speak on this. I really appreciate all the pertinent and relevant questions that Council Member Watson asked there. Unfortunately, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but your desire to have this certified in 2022, in my opinion, is a very interesting pipe dream. I've watched these things go on, and it might be 2032. You never know. I did have a question. Maybe I guess I probably will be answered off topic or behind the scenes or whatever you guys are doing there for the public. But a statement was made that that the elevations don't change. And my understanding, I'm not an engineer, a geologist, or a geological engineer, but my understanding was we have subsidence here. Our tectonic plates are tucking underneath the other one, and then I think as one of these experts said, eventually that plate goes ahead and kicks, and you go boing, and you might have a 6-foot jump as far as the elevation goes. So I think the elevations are changing relatively, but could be corrected on that one. The LC plan you have here, and I don't know if it specifically gets into where your jurisdiction and your ability to pull a permit ends. And I'm going to give you an example, and you can refer to this later. It should be definitely covered in this LCP. According to application number 1-ARC-21-1139, you have a project, and you're trying to get an application, and a portion of this, I think 300 foot at least, goes into the county's jurisdiction. So I can't understand how your current or your proposed plan would allow you to basically drop into somebody else's LCP. So that's a question as far as clarity goes, and of course that we could speak about a little bit later. If your plan does have these kind of variations where you can go what I think the supervisors call trespassing into somebody else's LCP jurisdiction, I would really be interested to see the justification legally for doing so. good luck with this. I've seen these go on forever, and hopefully you are working with staff. And I think, like as David Loyo said, he'd like to see it done before, I guess, he retires or passes on or whatever he does. But you never know with coastal commit plans, and I've got quite a bit of experience with this. Strongly recommend you address all the concerns, get your paperwork out to as many people as you can, especially Baykeeper, those people, and NEC and EPIC and those kind of people, so they can have early review, plenty of time to review that. I've seen before where not sufficient review of these plans has ended up with them ending up in litigation later down the road. Also caution anything you have regarding your treatment system and how it's addressed in your LCP, insofar as it's probably one letter off and one litigation off from closing down your whole plant there because of your discharges that you have into the bay, and that's something I would caution you on. So thank you for the opportunity to speak on your local coastal plan here.
You're welcome. Thank you for speaking.
Next speaker is Patricia. Go ahead, Patricia.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to get into this a little bit more in depth with, whenever I have more time. So some of the things I'm seeing off the top, I think maybe the main thing I see is there is a lot of talk about mitigation and the wetlands. Chapter 2, it mentions, Chapter 2, page 11, it mentions small or pocket wetlands don't apply on larger parcels that accommodate development. And I was kind of wondering what a pocket wetland was, like what was considered that, what was the size of a pocket or a small wetland. Chapter 6, under the environmental sensitive habitat areas, has a bunch of talk about mitigating wetlands. And then it goes on. I could list them all, but there's quite a bit in this. And so that is actually very, very disconcerting when we're talking a lot about doing in lieu fees, providing other areas. So basically banking wetlands and providing, equal value, productive value of wetlands and replacing them into other areas and filling in those wetlands for what I'm assuming is development. So that is one of my first major concerns with this. I have a lot of questions regarding that. And then the other one, of course, is wastewater treatment plant and some of our stormwater issues. So I know, especially during the wet months, our stormwater is going to be a big issue going into a wastewater treatment plant. I wish that was addressed a little bit more in detail. And then are there any areas within the Gateway area that we're looking at relocating our wastewater treatment plant? I know we are kind of talking that might be a possibility in the near future. And so I was wondering if there's any areas that the city had been looking at in the Gateway area, especially like on that north side of Samoa there. So anyways, I'm still kind of diving into this, and we'll probably have a lot more questions to come. So yeah, it's nice that we have the time. Clarifications on filling in wetlands is probably up there as one of my top concerns right now. I know there's a lot of wetlands that aren't marked on the map, on these maps in this packet, and they're fairly sizable wetlands. Anyhow, I know we've lost some frog habitat and other development areas recently in the Gateway area. So I was just kind of hoping that we could clarify some of that. So anyways, thank you all for hanging in there so long tonight. And I really, really appreciate everything you've done and all the effort that's gone into this local coastal plan. It sounds like it's been a doozy. So anyways, thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Patricia.
Okay. Last call for comments from Zoom. All right, we have one more. Go ahead, Jim.
Hello, Council. Hello, staff. Mine's a quick follow-up with Patricia's on wetlands, and just, I don't know if I could get clarification on it tonight, but just wondering if there is a state jurisdictional wetland within the area that sounds like it would potentially fall under the local coastal plan or possibly be principally permitted within the gateway. I'm just wondering how that would be handled, if it'd be any different than the normal process that would be considered by the Coastal Commission. Specifically, if there's an area that's considered to be a aquatic habitat, possibly like the northern red-legged frog, if there's any breeding activity. And that would be my question, just to be sure that that wasn't overlooked in the process of, possibly like a road going through or something like that. Anyway, if you have an answer to that at this point, it'd be great. Otherwise, something to consider down the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, I see no further comment on Zoom, so we'll turn to in-house.
Hi, real quick, Joanne McGarry again, and this has been fascinating to witness in person. I do have to say it was very difficult for me, Councilmember Watson, to understand what you were saying on occasion, so I would just appreciate sometimes being a little clearer in your speech so that I can hear what you're asking, so that I could understand the answers that the staff is giving. But, ultimately, I think I like to have things simplified. But one of the basic things that I've come to understand, and the IPCC, and there's a lot of global scientists and political strategists and all who are willing to help Main Street in dealing with the global realities and taking it down to Main Street. But what it really comes down to is Mother Earth bats last, and that's what we all really need to start thinking about when we think about any of this mitigation on any of the land use and coastal planning and all this. It's ultimately going to be what the planet decides to have happen in a global climate changing reality. So thanks for letting me be exposed to this, and I'm going to continue to be vigilant in listening to what people have to ask and have to answer on this very important local issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Okay, any final comments from the council before we move on?
I just want to say thanks again to everybody for being so patient. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I just wanted to thank David for his very thorough answers. And you've said this is your child that you've kind of been working on since you've worked here, and so it shows you're definitely an expert. And thank you so much for sharing with us.
Okay, so let's go to item B, elect a new vice mayor and consider Vice Mayor Goldstein's liaison appointments. So you can go ahead. I'm sure we've had such a robust rotation. I'm pretty sure the public is aware of how it works, but let's give them a quick overview.
Yep, I'll make it quick. We do have another midterm vacancy. This is in the vice mayor position, so the council is being asked tonight to consider filling that. The council has a protocol that allows for a rotation into the vice mayor and then into the mayor position. Based on that protocol, the next rotation would be council member Sarah Schaefer to rotate into that. It's based on the length of time that they've been on the council and whether or not they've served in that capacity before. In addition, so that would be one motion that you would want to make. Your protocol manual, it's a little different in tonight because we're just doing the vice mayor, but indicates that the mayor typically elects then that vice mayor position. That's just a suggestion in the protocol. Normally it's because you've just been seated as mayor, but a little bit different in this situation tonight. I did also include the liaison appointments to just have a quick, if we needed to review Councilmember Goldstein's liaison appointments. I have been in touch, obviously, with Councilmember Matthews because she is the alternate listed right now on Humboldt Transit Authority, and she does seem that she's got availability.
I already have the next meeting on my schedule, so if it's okay with everybody else, I'll just
So since you have an election in June, I'm not saying I don't know of any, that need to be filled immediately, but I wanted to make sure that alternates had a chance tonight to speak up. But we'll start with the vice mayor.
Okay, so I'm thinking that since there is public input on this, let's go ahead and take public input regarding election of the vice mayor, and then we can move forward.
Okay, taking public input from Zoom first. If you wanted to give public input on the rotation of vice mayor, we've got one. Go ahead, Kent.
For years, I sat in the chamber when the protocol was developed for the selection. There was a rotation there, as I remember. I did have a question, and I don't remember exactly what happened, and I could be corrected if my perception was wrong. There wasn't any protocol in there. Should a sitting council member be removed as far as mayor, and how they would be put back into rotation? I think that if someone resigned, and I don't know if that was the case themselves, then they would be, of course, the normal rotation would go on as if their term was ended. So I don't know how that protocol was addressed, and I don't know how that relayering of the potential system would work as far as that goes if someone doesn't serve their full term as far as mayor goes. So that's just a question on your protocol there. I never saw that addressed. I never saw that happen before in the many years that I've been in attendance of the Arcata Council meetings. So that is my main comment regarding that. And so if possible, I don't know, if you could describe what the future rotation would be regarding the current people sitting up there. I know before it's been a traditional thing where the vice mayor then moves up to be the mayor. And so now that we seem to be out of rotation, it will be interesting to see how the musical chairs will proceed in the future also. Thank you for my opportunity to comment.
And do we have any other people wishing to comment?
No more public comment on Zoom.
Okay, anyone in chambers? All right, so I would like to make a motion to elect Councilmember Schaefer as our vice mayor.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do I vote?
Okay, so that passes unanimously, and for the record, if Councilmember Schaefer does vote aye on that, she just wasn't sure whether she should vote for herself or not. All right, so that takes us to our final time for oral and written communications, and this time is provided.
Talk about the liaison positions.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah.
Well,
I mean, Meredith said that
I'm
she
the
could do
alternate for HTA. I'm already been invited to the next meeting.
Okay.
unless,
What were the other, I mean, that was your only liaison position?
I think one of the other ones, Sarah would rotate,
Yeah, 'cause
Councilmember Schaefer would rotate into.
Yeah, for the Cal Poly,
Okay.
that's mayor and vice mayor, so I'll
Okay.
rotate into that, and I did attend that last month,
Okay.
getting up to speed.
Okay.
So,
And she was also on the homelessness committee, right?
She was on the homelessness, working committee. She is also primary on the Humboldt Del Norte Hazardous Materials Joint Powers Authority, and you are alternate. So if that's a
Oh, I
conflict.
thought I was the primary.
You are now.
Okay, right, that's fine. And I'd be happy to do the homelessness committee too.
yeah, because you were on, oh, I'm on. You were on that previously, so that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Cool.
And then we'll have the election in June, and we'll have a, new person coming in then in July.
All right, great. So moving to oral and written communications.
Do we need to make a motion
For the
to approve
liaison?
those liaison positions? Because that's normally what we do, right?
Yeah, you can. Go ahead.
Okay.
I mean, it was seemed consensus.
Yeah,
but
go for it.
ahead.
I'll move to make Meredith the primary on HTA, to make me the primary on Humboldt Hazardous Materials Response Team, I think it's called, and for me to take her place in the homelessness working group.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And I just want to say, thank you for allowing me to step into the rotation, but I look forward to serving as vice mayor and working with everybody and continuing to work with everybody in that new capacity. So thank you.
Please stay, because I'm not.
And I just realized we didn't make a term for the vice mayor. Should we do that as part of the motion?
Well, we reassess all of our terms in December. That's when so it would be just to fill till then.
Okay.
I mean, because that's what we've been doing.
So Emily's turn.
She's just stepping in for Emily, so we'll all be rotating in December again, just to keep it interesting. All right, so final chance for oral and written communication for things that were not on the agenda. Please raise your hand if you are on the Zoom webinar, or press *9 now if you are on a phone line and you would like to make a public comment. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. When it is time for your public comment, you will be unmuted and invited to speak. So again, we'll go to those online first.
All right, Ken, go ahead.
This is Ken Sawatsky. Last time I brought forward a topic to you regarding litigation and your record of having seemed to be headed more toward more litigation, which costs quite a bit. The county has a trend, and that seems to be going in the same way. County seems to be very dysfunctional. I think you're a little more dysfunctional. Just to say you seem to have a good grasp and some great staff there, which helps a lot. The county has some great staff also, especially their auditor controller, who seems to be in the limelight lately. People may not understand that. But anyway, I did wish to caution you on something as far as litigation. And I do risk management, deal with all kinds of attorneys. I was talking to the state attorney general's office 3 or 4 times during the last few days on a few topics. And so I do play in those particular areas. Of great concern and potential, I don't know if you got a judge who wanted to set an example, was if you have a member on your staff, on your board up there that does not have equal access to your staff, and that appears to be the case here, I believe you are in jeopardy. And this could be the kind of litigation where somebody who's treated differently than the rest of you for whatever reason, without having true justification that it should be in the public forum, that a judge could spank you and say, well, we're going to make an example out of you. You're a small community. We're only going to hit you for $6 million this time. That's not covered by your liability fund. So I would caution you to treat everybody equally, and anybody who's violating someone's rights could well be brought forward in litigation. I think they would most likely prevail. So that's a little bit of a warning, and I have had dealings with these particular items, and you can take what I say with a grain of salt. I'm not an attorney, but I have many of them on retainer, and I work with them. So I would caution you in that particular area. I also would caution you with blocking the public's access to information. Also, when we ask a question at the meeting, if the chair is chaired in a manner which I would refer to as Rex Bowen would chair it from the county, and I see that apparently happening here, in my opinion, as far as treatment, as far as participation, then that does not play well with the public. And again, that brings a lot of angst to the public, and I think they have the right to have their questions answered in this forum, and that's done in all other forums I've been to. This is the first one where I've seen, especially midstream in a meeting, the access to having questions answered. Apparently you don't want to have them answered in the public. I can understand, it may cause you some trouble, but that's your job, is to have your staff answer those questions. Thank you for my opportunity to speak.
All right, our next speaker is Shoshana. Go ahead, Shoshana.
Hi there. I just had 3 things I was hoping to bring up as far as pedestrian and biker safety. I've just noticed some really wonderful bright red fresh paint in some places around town. I'm hoping it can be refreshed all around town. And also some crosswalks that are really, really super faded right now. I've noticed some areas on major streets like LK Wood where the bike path is not complete or missing in some spots. And it seems like there's those pathways and the pathways used for elementary and high school kids during morning rush on Q Street to 11th and over on Alliance. And then I also feel really passionately about a hope for some kind of extra bonus action to protect school children, high schoolers, current and coming soon university students, parents with strollers in all of our community, and several important crosswalks in Arcata. And I really would love to throw it out there to the universe that LK Wood and Alliance are such major roads connecting our big residential areas of Arcata. And I walked along those streets all my lifetime growing up, especially on Alliance. And they're such an important part for walking, scootering, and biking people. On Alliance, there are 3 crosswalks crosswalks without stop signs that I can't see kids bravely dash across every morning at M Street connecting to the bike path just down the hill from Arcata High School, and also at 17th Street where Shake Park ends. And over on LK Wood, there are 2 spots where the sidewalk ends and you have to cross the street. And of course, over at St. Louis Road, where Jen Mariposa Garcia recently lost her life after being hit by a car while pushing a stroller in the crosswalk. I hope that there's some way to help install lighty crossing signals at those 6 locations. And I also wish for one on K Street over on 8th or 9th Street, going from the Creamery District toward downtown. But at least those 6 would be an amazing start. And I don't know if that's something people could help fundraise for or make happen, but those lighty, brighty, wonderful crossings so much help when people get so distracted as they're driving. Thank you so much. Thanks for helping make it safer. Thank you.
Thank you, Shoshana.
No more public comment on Zoom.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much for letting me be here in person and come up to the podium so many times tonight. I feel like an essential citizen. I just want the City Council and staff to know that I'm signing the paperwork and turning it in tomorrow to the Environmental Services Department to become an official volunteer for the city, and I have already taken my wagon and tricycle around to the farmers market with the soil saver compost bins that the city provides to the residents, and trying to promote people in our community to compost to help the earth. And so that's one of my volunteer things. I also have recently signed up to volunteer with Arcata Main Street. And I'm also live in the Creamery District and am a volunteer at the Arcata Playhouse. And I have here the annual Zero to Fierce Women's Festival pamphlet of all the wonderful week-long activities that men, women, and anyone can come and attend and participate in. The Playhouse Arts and the Playhouse do an incredible job on putting together this event, and it incorporates all aspects of the community in music, art, theater, and other. There's going to be a wonderful walk in the marsh on Saturday morning that I highly, highly, highly recommend. But anyway, I have these here for you and your family and friends to distribute to, and I just encourage you to participate in this wonderful civic event in honor of International Women's Month. So thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Okay, so that takes us to council and staff reports. So do we have any reports from council?
Sure, I will mention there is a chamber mixer tomorrow night, Arcata Chamber Mixer. It will be in Eureka at the Aquatic Center. It is sponsored by, hosted by the Cal Poly, so it should be really interesting. It's from 5:30 to 7. I also want to know that I've heard a lot of feedback that people are getting anxious about their recycling. Just want you to know I'm on the HWMA board, and I just formed a subcommittee that is going to really dive a little deeper into kind of solving some problems around, hopefully, around our waste. That's it.
This isn't necessarily an update from one of my liaisonships or anything, but I did just want to say, and Shoshana's comment reminded me of this, I had the opportunity to ride with Critical Mass on the last Friday of every month, and this month's ride was in honor of Jennifer Garcia and also the bicyclist that was hit on Spear near Alliance, and we, solemnly biked out there all with flowers and left flowers at the 2 slow down signs in those areas. And so just, really reminding people that we have been seeing across the county an increase of, bike and pedestrian versus car accidents, just to be vigilant, drive slowly, and especially, as we're living in this world of climate change, we see a lot more people, looking for cleaner ways to get around, and I'm looking forward to working with all these various plans that we have coming up to improve these, safeties, especially in these key corridors. And so just wanted to say, remember, critical mass, get out there, ride your bike, last Friday of every month. Thanks.
Yeah, so just to respond a little bit to Shoshana, just so you know, we did talk very deeply about pedestrian bicycle safety last night at our goal setting, and it's something that the council feels very strongly about. So thank you. We hear you.
All right, so just a quick update. The Arcata Main Street is in, they're doing a membership drive, also working on Oyster Festival, which is going to be a great event, trying to build back, which it's tough, you know, when we haven't been able to have it in its full force. So it'll still be a little bit different, but it's going to be great. And they're still looking for volunteers to help with that, as well as for more board members for Main Street. And then the Vice Mayor and I did attend our quarterly meeting with HSU, which we do every quarter. And, you know, we just learned about their enrollment projections and how things really have started to traject upwards since the announcement of the Cal Poly, which I'm sure we're not surprised by. Also, we talked about the green and gold corridor. We're working to make G and H streets more of a connection, as well as safety and the footbridge. So just those meetings are always really robust and good. It's a chance for us to connect with the university and make sure that we're on the same page and share concerns and collaboration. So that's always a good meeting.
That sounds really good. Thanks for the update. Yeah, the G&H corridor is kind of been a passion project for me for several years, working with HSU, so I'm really glad that there's progress being made on it, and I really look forward to seeing that. This is part of why, you know, I was pushing to get G Street repaved, so I'm also really excited about that project. And other than that, I don't have anything to report.
I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't mention that there are terrible things going on in the world outside of this council chamber. There's terrible things being done to people in the Ukraine, and even though, you know, we are really focused on our local government right now, it's important to know that there are some atrocities being done outside of our council. So just, you know, think about that. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.